Chapter 3140. The guards of Snowwind Ridge did not give any warning. The group of people outside seemed to have descended from the sky above Snowwind Ridge, and the sounds of discussion could be heard. Although one of the voices sounded familiar, Yu Hao, Xia Qingying, and the rest were shocked. They did not have time to think as they stood up and walked out of the hall. Dozens of figures were standing in the air looking around. There were men and women, old and young, in this group of people. Some of the women were so beautiful that they were indescribably beautiful, like fairies that were untainted by the mortal world. Some of the strong cultivators exuded a strong demonic aura and had tiger heads. They did not belong to the human race at all. The only similarity was that this group of people had very high cultivation levels. It was so high that the people of Snowwind Ridge could not detect it at all. 3 figures stood at the front of this group of people. The person on the left had a thunderous voice. He was free and unrestrained as he talked and laughed. His eyes flickered with lightning and could not be looked at directly. The person on the right was tall and burly. He had a calm demeanor, and his every move carried a kind of dignity that came from being in a high position for a long time. He looked familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. The person in the middle was dressed in green and had black hair. He had delicate features and a smile on his face, looking like a gentle and elegant scholar. Su Ba Su. Duan Tianliang seemed to have discovered something, and his voice was trembling and excited. Yu Hao also widened his eyes and looked at the green-robed cultivator among the 3 people in front. He was surprised and happy and could not help but say, "Qingying, look, that person seems to be." At that moment, Xia Qingying was also looking at that figure in a daze, her beautiful eyes filled with disbelief. Shen Fei, Gu Wenjun, and the rest also noticed that green-robed man and were stunned on the spot. Even if they recognized him, they did not dare to rashly acknowledge him when they saw him standing together with the group of exalted immortals and talking and laughing casually. This feeling was like 2 childhood playmates reuniting after many years and discovering that the other party had already been conferred the title of Marquis and held a high position. This feeling of distance was indescribable. At that moment, the green-robed cultivator turned around and saw the people of Snowwind Ridge. He descended and walked in front of them, cupping his fists and smiling. "Everyone, how have you been? Brother Su, exalted immortal Su, is it really you?" Yu Hao said these 2 words, and then realized something. He quickly changed his words and asked cautiously. Su Zimo waved his hand and smiled. "There are no exalted immortals or infernal immortals." Hearing this familiar tone, Duan Tianliang was finally sure. He shouted excitedly, "Boss Su, it's really you." Lin Zhan, Feng Cantian, Night Spirit Tiger, Nian Qi Xiaoning, Demoness Ji and the others landed too. Everyone couldn't help but laugh when they heard such straightforward words. Shen Fei, Gu Wenjun, and the others also hurried forward to greet him. "Him." Xia Qingying's eyes reddened. She said softly, "He is the Uncle Su that I mentioned to you before. He is the person who helped us overcome many difficulties." "Ah!" the child exclaimed. His eyes were sparkling as he looked at Su Zimo. Xia Qingying looked at Su Zimo. Her heart was filled with emotions. Her expression was complicated. 10,000 years ago, she knew that the person in front of her was like a divine dragon. It was only because of an accident that he was dormant on the Dragon Abyss planet. One day this person would leave. She did not even think that there would be a chance for them to meet again. 10,000 years had passed unknowingly for the people of Wind Snow Ridge. There were not many changes. However, it was only when they caught sight of Su Zimo that everyone was stunned. So, that person had already walked so far on the path of cultivation, after more than 10,000 years. Su Zimo's gaze landed on the child. He smiled and waved his hand. Even some of Wind Snow Ridge's old friends would become a little reserved in front of Su Zimo. However, this child did not show any fear. When he saw Su Zimo waving his hand, he ran over excitedly. He looked up at Su Zimo. "What's your name?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. "Yiming Yu Yiming." The child's eyes were bright as he answered crisply. Su Zimo smiled. He reached out his hand and gently rubbed the child's head. The child blinked. This was a very normal action. His father, mother, and other uncles often did this to him. However, for some reason, when this Uncle Su's hand landed on his head, he felt a warm current flowing into his body and into his limbs. He felt that his body was warm and comfortable. All the pores on his body seemed to have opened up. The child felt sleepy. His eyelids gradually became heavy. In a daze, he could not help but think of a poem that his mother had read to him. The immortal touched my head, my hair tied, and I lived forever. He's just asleep. You don't have to worry. Su Zimo said with a smile. He was only a 5 or 6-year-old child. His body suddenly underwent such a huge transformation, and he could not bear it. Thus, he fell asleep and slowly digested this change. Yu Hao and Xia Qingying were originally a little worried, but soon, their eyes widened. They saw that their child was silently making a breakthrough in his cultivation realm in his sleep. He broke through 3 levels consecutively, and had already reached the 4th stage of the mystic immortal realm. Yu Hao and Xia Qingying were surprised and happy. Su Zimo was obviously giving their child a fortuitous opportunity. In the blink of an eye, he broke through 3 levels. On Dragon Abyss Planet, breaking through 1 level was as difficult as ascending to heaven. The method that Su Zimo displayed now was simply like a miracle to the two of them. In fact, with Yu Hao and Xia Qingying's cultivation, they could not see the fortuitous opportunity that Su Zimo gave this child at all. Breaking through 3 levels was only the most superficial thing. The greatest fortuitous opportunity that Su Zimo gave this child was to borrow the power of creation Qinglian to change his muscles and bones. He was reborn and shed his mortal body, allowing his body and bloodline to undergo a transformation and lay down a cultivation foundation. This child's future cultivation path would be twice the result with half the effort. Su Zimo's gaze turned, and it landed on a jade bracelet on the child's wrist. He pricked his fingertip and squeezed out a drop of blood, which fell on this jade bracelet. He used his divine sense to refine this drop of blood into the jade bracelet, forming lines of exquisite blood-colored patterns on it. The people in Feng Shuling Mountain naturally could not see what was going on. However, Lin Zhan, Feng Cantian, and the rest were clear that although it was only a drop of blood, it was the blood essence of Qinglian, a level 12 creation cultivator. Even if this child could cultivate to the true first realm, this blood pattern jade bracelet would be of great use to him. End of chapter. Chapter 3141. Xia Qingying thought for a while and said hesitantly, "Fellow Taoist Su, you came at the right time. There's something that we can't decide on, and we want to ask you about leaving the Dragon Abyss planet, right?" Su Zimo said with a smile. He had already guessed it in his heart. Xia Qingying nodded and said, "Some time ago, 2 exalted immortals called Lin Lei and Lin Luo came to Wind Snow Ridge. They invited us to an unknown place." When Lin Zhan heard this, he suddenly asked, "Did the 2 of them bully you because of their cultivation?" No. Xia Qingying hurriedly waved her hand and said, "Those 2 exalted immortals were very nice. They were also very polite to cultivators who ascended from the lower domain." Duan Tianliang couldn't help but say, "Those 2 were completely different from the other exalted immortals. I felt that it was a little unreal." Lin Zhan nodded. Immortal King Ling Long couldn't help but hit Lin Zhan lightly. She said angrily, "Are you still worried about Lei and Luo? Everyone in Wind Snow Ridge had a strange expression. Su Zimo scanned with his divine sense, and he already knew the cultivation realms of Xia Qingying and the others. Living beings who could ascend to the upper domain were all quite talented. If they were in a different cultivation environment with rich heaven-earth essence qi, their cultivation realms would definitely not stop there. They would at least be earth immortals." Su Zimo said, "I suggest that you all leave this place. The essence qi on the Dragon Abyss planet is too thin, and the situation in the heaven domain is chaotic. It's no longer a good place. Instead of staying here, it's better to follow us to open a new domain." "Fellow Taoist Su, are you going too?" Yu Hao asked. Su Zimo nodded. Yu Hao, Xia Qingying, and the others looked at each other. Almost without hesitation, they all nodded and said, "Then we'll go too." They didn't know Lin Lei and Lin Luo, but everyone in Wind Snow Ridge trusted Su Zimo. Su Zimo said, "Yes, prepare as soon as possible, and see how many people are willing to leave together." When the time comes, there will be people coming to pick you all up on the immortal boat. Let's go together. After giving a few more instructions, Su Zimo and the others didn't stay in Wind Snow Ridge for too long, and went somewhere else. Looking at the departing figures of Su Zimo and the rest, everyone from Wind Snow Ridge sighed. Duan Tianliang sighed with emotion. I didn't expect that after only 10,000 years, Boss Su has already done so well. The group of people with him don't seem to have low cultivation. They might even be celestial immortals. I'm afraid there are more than celestial immortals. 2. For example, that burly man with eyes like lightning. His bearing is extraordinary. He might be a true immortal. 2. The time. Yu Hao's eyes glittered. He nodded and said, judging from Cultivator Su's attitude, he should be able to mobilize some people. It's very likely that they are under the command of the Emperor of Heavenly Wrath, Immortal Emperor Creation, and the Emperor of Battle. Shen Fei said with a smile. If that's the case, we might have a chance to meet those big shots if we follow Cultivator Su. Su Zimo and the others stayed on the Dragon Abyss planet for more than 10 days. Apart from gathering the people of the Nine Clouds Immortal Realm, the Demon Realm, and the Pure Land of Bliss, they also scattered around the Heaven Realm and gathered some people on planets similar to the Dragon Abyss planet. However, there were too few people who were willing to leave their homes and follow them to an unknown place. The uncertainty of the future was enough to deter many cultivators. Traveling through the starry sky, there were countless unimaginable dangers. Whether or not they could find a suitable place to rest was unknown, not to mention opening up a new interface. Even with the War Kingdom, the Heavenly Baron Sect, and the Heaven and Earth Academy, when they left the Dragon Abyss planet, there were only a few tens of millions of people on the ferry boat. Even an ordinary planet like the Dragon Abyss planet had hundreds of millions of people in the lower realm. Su Zimo could understand the worries of the people in the lower realm, so he did not force them. The ferry boat set off and entered the space tunnel, heading north. After Wu Dao left the Heaven Realm, he immediately returned to the Great Desolation Realm. After all, Daiyu was injured. He was still worried. In the Divine Firmament Palace, he did not want to fight the Great Emperor Zhang Tian in advance, because he was worried about Daiyu's safety. Besides, Wu Dao was not in a hurry to fight the Great Emperor Zhang Tian or the Heavenly Court. The longer he delayed, the better it would be for him. He had just achieved the Martial Monarch realm. As long as he had enough time, he could take another step forward and reach the Greater Success Martial Monarch realm, or even the Perfection Martial Monarch realm. By then he would have a better chance of winning the War of the Heavens. How was it? Daiyu woke up from her meditative state and asked softly when she saw Wu Dao's return. Wu Dao recounted his conversation with the Nine Firmament Immortal Emperor. Daiyu was shocked when she heard that the Great Emperor Zhang Tian was the master of the underworld. The information about the Great Emperor Zhang Tian was too shocking for her. A moment later, Daiyu said in a low voice, "You didn't make a move back then because you were wary of the Devil Lord, the Demonic Emperor, and the Brahma Ghost Mother, right?" "Yes." Wu Dao nodded and said, "After all, the three of them are the masters of the Shura Dao, the Beast Dao, and the Hungry Ghost Dao. They're too close to the underworld." Daiyu said, "I've never met the Brahma Ghost Mother. I've only talked to the Devil Lord once, so I can't be sure. As for the Demonic Emperor, I've met her for a period of time. She's definitely not the same type of person as Zhang Tian." Daiyu sounded certain. Oh, Wu Dao's expression changed and he looked inquisitive. Daiyu had mentioned this before, but she did not elaborate. It could be said that Daiyu was the person the Demonic Emperor favored the most in this life, which was why she had approached her. Even though Daiyu had rejected her, the Demonic Emperor did not make things difficult for her. Daiyu said, "The Demonic Emperor abhors evil and believes in the reincarnation of the Heavenly Dao. Good will be rewarded with good, and evil with evil. That's why she dragged those evil people into the Beast Dao and tortured them for eternity. Actually, her actions can't be considered evil at all. In my opinion, her belief is a little naive." Su Zimo nodded. "There were too many injustices in the world. Good will be rewarded with good and evil with evil. At the end of the day, it was just wishful thinking on people's part. In order to break through the heavenly court's seal, the ancient heavenly emperors chose to fight against the heavens. Not only did they die, but they also bore endless infamy. What kind of good karma did they receive? The 9 heavenly emperors of the heavenly court were high and mighty, looking down on the mortal world. They enslaved all living beings, and sealed off the path of ascension for all living beings. They caused numerous catastrophes and erased all truths. They created the celestial realm, and patrolled and monitored all living beings. What kind of evil did they receive? There was only the Inferno Heaven Emperor, who was currently suppressed in the Avicii Hell by the Infernal Emperor. Daiyu said, I once asked her something. Why didn't you explain why the world slandered you as the demonic emperor, and called you an evil spirit? What did she say? Wu Dao's true body asked. I don't care. Daiyu imitated the demonic emperor's tone, and replied indifferently. Chapter 3142. These words made the evil emperor's figure clearer in Wu Dao's mind. The evil emperor was the evil emperor. She had her own pride. She didn't even bother to explain. If everyone in the world wants to slander me, I don't care. I only care about my own beliefs. I care about the reincarnation of the heavenly Tao, and that evil people should be punished. If an evil person escapes karma, then I will drag him into the path of the beast, and let him be attacked by other beasts. The evil emperor was indeed different from Fengdu. However, there was obviously an even bigger secret and mystery on Fengdu. Martial Dao's true body couldn't guess or see through it. What's your first impression of Fengdu? Daiyu suddenly asked. Most of the time, the first impression between people was very strange. One could often see through the surface and see something hidden deep. A sense of difference. Wu Dao pondered and said, I've seen the Devil Master, the Evil Emperor, and the Brahma Ghost Mother. But the moment I saw Fengdu, I felt that he was very different from the 3 of them. An essence soul great emperor? Daiyu asked. Of course, this is one of the differences between him and the 3 of them. Wu Dao shook his head and said, but this difference can't give me that feeling. In fact, the moment he left Divine Firmament Palace, Fengdu had revealed similar information. Fengdu said that he was different from the Lord of Hell. Even if the infernal great emperor was alive, he wouldn't be able to suppress and kill him. Why was that? If he was only an essence soul great emperor, he couldn't be stronger than the Lord of Hell and the rest. Then where did Fengdu's confidence come from? The Devil Master's attitude towards Fengdu was obviously a little strange. He seemed to be deliberately avoiding and unwilling to mention it. Why was that? In the space tunnel, a huge ferry boat traveled at a constant speed. Many figures stood on the deck of the ferry boat, observing the surroundings through the space tunnel. After leaving Dragon Abyss Planet, Su Zimo and the rest drove the ferry boat and drifted in the vast sea of stars of the 3,000 worlds. A year had passed. It wasn't easy to find a suitable habitat. In the 3,000 worlds, almost all the areas that were suitable for living were occupied by the major worlds. Everyone steered the immortal boat and headed north, further and further away. By the time they reached this place, the surroundings were already desolate. Although there were still a large number of stars floating in the sky, the heaven and earth essence chi here was almost dried up, and it was far inferior to the Dragon Abyss star, causing there to be practically no living beings on these stars. However, when they passed by these stars, they could vaguely tell that there were indeed traces of life on these stars in ancient times. Seeing this, Su Zimo fell into deep thought. Several epochs ago, without the seal of the 9 heavens, the heaven-earth essence chi in the 3,000 worlds was extremely dense. This place was definitely covered by the heaven-earth essence chi as well. However, the appearance of the heavenly court cut off a large amount of heaven-earth essence chi, causing the 3,000 worlds to be lacking in essence chi. The various realms could only rely on the various heaven and earth spirit roots to absorb and plunder the heaven and earth spirit chi, causing this area to gradually become desolate. We left our hometown and followed these people to this godforsaken place. What bad luck. That's right. Looking at the surroundings, it's even worse than our Yi Tianxing. If I continue to float like this, when will it end? In some of the cabins, some of the cultivators grumbled softly. If Su Zimo paid attention, he could hear them clearly. He could understand the resentment of those cultivators. However, his original plan was to stay as far away from the 3,000 worlds as possible. Master, you brought so many people from the Snow Wind Ridge out, and ended up floating outside for so long with an unknown future. Aren't you being too reckless? A voice sounded from another cabin. Everyone calm down. I believe in fellow Taoist Su. Xia Qingying's voice sounded. A year has passed and we don't even have a place to settle down. Another person complained. Furthermore, even if we find a place to stay here, the heaven and earth essence qi in the surroundings is almost dried up and inferior to our dragon abyss star. What's the point of us coming here? Everyone, Yu Hao said in a deep voice. There are many experts on the immortal boat this time, such as fellow Taoist Su Zimo and the others. They are all heaven immortals and true spirits. They also need to cultivate, and can't find a place without heaven and earth essence qi to settle down. Rumble. At that moment, the immortal boat suddenly vibrated and broke through the space tunnel. It arrived in the vast sea of stars and gradually stopped. A huge piece of land floated in front of the immortal boat. Compared to the heaven realm, this piece of land was naturally far inferior. However, it was not much different from the divine firmament immortal realm. Not to mention tens of millions of living beings. It was more than enough to accommodate billions or tens of billions of living beings. However, at a glance, this piece of land was covered in dust and gravel. Wherever his divine consciousness covered, he could not even see a single plant, let alone any living beings. Many cultivators also walked out of the cabins. Tens of millions of cultivators stood on the immortal boat densely packed. When they looked over and saw the piece of land in front of them, they could not hide the disappointment in their eyes. Don't tell me we're going to stay here in the future? This is really a barren land where even birds don't shit. Why don't we go back? Without this kind of immortal boat escorting us, how can we go back alive with our cultivation levels? Yu Hao, Xia Qingying, and the others had just comforted the people of Feng Shuling. But when they saw this scene, they also fell silent, not knowing how to explain. Waves of voices came from the crowd, and it became noisier and noisier. Lin Zhan, Immortal King Ling Long, Feng Cantian, and the others were not worried. After all, Su Zimo had obtained a wonderful 7 treasures tree in the divine firmament immortal realm. With this spirit root of heaven and earth, even if it could not be compared to the heaven realm, it could still improve the cultivation environment here. Everyone was worried that the wonderful 7 treasures tree could survive in such a harsh environment. Su Zimo and the others landed from the immortal boat and flew to the sky above this piece of land. Su Zimo took out the wonderful 7 treasures tree from his storage bag and casually threw it to the east of this piece of land. Lin Zhan frowned slightly. The environment of this piece of land was so harsh. Even if the wonderful 7 treasures tree survived, the surrounding heaven and earth essence qi would probably not be able to cover the entire piece of land. If it was placed in the east, it might not be able to take care of the large territory in the west, south, north, and middle. Lin Zhan was about to speak when Immortal King Ling Long gently squeezed his hand and shook her head slightly, indicating that there was no need to be anxious and that they should continue watching. Immortal King Ling Long believed that Su Zimo would not casually throw the wonderful 7 treasures tree to the east. There must be something else. As expected, before long, he took out a withered willow branch from his storage bag and tossed it casually, allowing it to take root in the south. This is an immortal willow? Lin Zhan and Immortal King Ling Long's eyes lit up. The immortal willow was the spirit root of heaven and earth in the divine firmament immortal realm. However, this immortal willow branch was obviously dead. The wonderful 7 treasures tree had just been uprooted, and there was still a lot of vitality in its body. However, this immortal willow branch did not have any vitality at all. Su Zimo took out the carefree tree from his storage bag and placed it in the west. Finally, he planted the peach tree sapling in the north. Chapter 3143. The 7 Wonders Tree Immortal Willow, Carefree Wood, Immortal Peach Tree and Immortal Peach Tree were extremely rare heaven and earth spirit roots. That was also the reason why it was extremely difficult to revive them. Back in Heaven and Earth Academy, Su Zimo had attempted to revive the immortal willow and carefree wood. However, nothing happened even after many years. Now that he was in this barren land, the surrounding environment was even worse. Let alone such rare heaven and earth spirit roots. There was not a single bit of vegetation on this land. It was a complete desert. It was even more difficult to restore the vitality of the 4 spiritual roots. However, it was not entirely impossible. Back in Heaven and Earth Academy, Su Zimo's Qinglian true body had yet to grow to the peak of grade 12. Furthermore, the Qinglian true body was cultivating in Heaven and Earth Academy and would not dare to absorb Heaven and Earth Essence Qi with all its might, worried that it would cause too much of a commotion. Right now, there was no longer a need for Su Zimo to continue hiding the fact that he possessed the creation Qinglian. From a certain perspective, the grade 12 creation Qinglian was the rarest spirit root in the world and was even stronger than the divine builder tree of the heavenly realm. Therefore, Su Zimo was not worried about heading to some barren land. Even if it was a desert, he could turn it into an oasis. Su Zimo channeled his bloodline slowly, and the sound of tsunamis could be heard from his body. The next moment, right in front of everyone, Su Zimo's figure vanished and was replaced by a jade-green Qinglian that took root in the ground and soared into the skies. The creation Qinglian swayed and shone brightly as lotus flowers bloomed and burst forth with auspicious colors. At that moment, the creation Qinglian seemed to have connected to heaven and earth and become the only god that ruled over the world. All the cultivators were dumbfounded. Their faces were full of shock as they watched this scene in disbelief. Swoosh! Suddenly, the tens of millions of cultivators heard a series of violent gusts of wind. Before anyone could react, Heaven-Earth Yuan Qi, as boundless as the sea, surged from all directions and gathered on this piece of land. The Heaven and Earth Essence Qi gathered continuously and surrounded the jade-green Qinglian, spreading towards the barren land. The Heaven-Earth Yuan Qi on this piece of land was getting denser and denser. Many cultivators were dumbfounded. Most of them came from the many desolate stars around the heaven realm. Their primordial qi was thin, so they had never felt such a large amount of primordial qi. Enveloped by the dense heaven and earth yuan qi, everyone was stunned. Not to mention them, some of the cultivators who were originally cultivating in the heaven realm, such as those from the Warring States Kingdom, the Heaven Baron sect, and the Divine Firmament Immortal Realm, were also shocked at this time. The cultivation environment on this land was not much different from when they were in the heaven realm, and the 12th grade Qinglian's transformation of this barren land had yet to stop. The Heaven-Earth Yuan Qi on this land was still increasing. In just a short 2 hours, the density of the heaven and earth origin qi had already surpassed that of the heaven realm. This scene was unimaginable to Lin Zhan, Feng Qintian, and the others. In reality, the reason they were able to achieve this was because of the terrifying Qinglian. At this moment, Qinglian was rooted in the ground, and his lotus was almost bursting through the sky. Su Zimo could clearly feel that Qinglian was not only absorbing the heaven-earth yuan qi from the starry sky of the 3,000 worlds, but it was also absorbing wisps of heaven-earth yuan qi from the heavenly court. Although the 9 heavens had sealed it, it was still unable to stop Qinglian's plundering. The changes in this barren land were still ongoing. At this moment, Su Zimo transformed into Qinglian. Countless roots continued to spread. His divine sense also followed these roots and spread to every corner of this land. In fact, in the depths of this land, there were countless roots and seeds buried. However, due to the gradual drying up of the heaven-earth yuan qi, the vitality of this land dissipated. Countless living beings died, and the flowers and trees withered and withered. At this moment, Qinglian's roots stretched out and injected endless vitality into this land, and it also awakened the flowers and trees. Under the gazes of countless people, a layer of greenery gradually appeared on the originally barren desert. The original desert gradually grew a large area of buckthorns. On the barren undulating mountain range, vegetation gradually grew. It was green and full of vitality. Rumble! At this moment, a thunderous sound came from the sky. In the blink of an eye, dark clouds covered the sky. Feng Xantian's eyes were like lightning. His body moved and he was in the clouds, forming a blazing and eye-catching sea of lightning around him. Spring thunder roared, and all living beings came to life. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, heavy rain poured down. Tens of millions of living beings from the lower realm were in the heavy rain. Even though the rain drenched their clothes, their faces were filled with excitement. This was not ordinary rain. The heaven-earth yuan qi on this land was too dense, and when the rain fell, lightning Taoist techniques fused with the endless heaven-earth yuan qi, causing every drop of rain to be like spiritual liquid. The original potholes were gradually filled with rainwater, and lakes were formed again. Green mountains were surrounded by green water. The river flowed endlessly, falling from the mountain peak like a waterfall, creating large waves and dense fog. In the valley, spring water gurgled, hundreds of flowers bloomed and butterflies danced. The heavy rain lasted for a day and a night before it gradually stopped. Feng Santian's face was pale. He had used up a lot of energy, but his eyes were filled with gratification. After the heavy rain, the sea of clouds in the sky was vast and unpredictable. A gorgeous rainbow stretched across the land, complementing the Qinglian that connected heaven and earth. Some people closed their eyes and opened their arms, feeling everything around them. Someone's mind was stirred, and he laughed loudly. Some people could not hold it in anymore, and plunged into the lake, swimming freely. Some people scooped up a handful of moist soil, and deeply smelled the fragrance of the soil mixed with the vegetation after the heavy rain. Some people knelt on the ground, and looked at everything around them with tears streaming down their faces. Everywhere they looked, they saw thousands of rocks competing with each other, tens of thousands of ravines competing with each other, abundant vegetation, beautiful purple and red, green mountains dripping with green, and vast clouds like rising clouds. How was this a barren land? This was simply a paradise. Not to mention Long Yuan planet. Even the heaven realm was far inferior to this land in front of them. Everyone in Feng Shuling looked at the scene in front of them in a daze, their faces full of shock. The scene in front of them was like a miracle to them. The original doubts and complaints had long disappeared. Just now, everything was done by Uncle Su. Yu Yiming nestled in Xia Qinghua's arms, his eyes wide open as he asked in disbelief. Not to mention this child. Even Yu Hao and Xia Qingying could not imagine it. Su Zimo seemed to be even more powerful than they had imagined. If it was just a true spirit, would he have such means to change the world? It should be. Xia Qingying murmured softly, and looked at the child in her arms subconsciously. Then she exclaimed, "What's wrong?" Yu Hao quickly asked. Xia Qingying's divine sense scanned Yu Yiming's body several times, and could not help but ask, You child, how did you break through again?" When they left Long Yuan planet, Yu Yiming was only a 4th stage mystic immortal. Just now, after being nourished by the surrounding heaven-earth essence qi, and the cleansing of the spirit rain, he had broken through again, and cultivated to the 5th stage mystic immortal. "I don't know, is cultivation very difficult?" the child asked in confusion. Chapter 3144. Hearing that, Xia Qingying stared at Yu Yiming angrily, almost raising her hand to slap him. Duan Tianliang, Shen Fei, and the rest of the Wind Snow Ridge cultivators' faces darkened when they heard that. "This brat, you two have to teach him a lesson," Duan Tianliang muttered. They had cultivated bitterly on the Dragon Abyss planet for tens of thousands of years, but they had only reached the 8th stage, the 9th tribulation mystic immortal. This brat had advanced by 3 stages after sleeping. After being drenched in the rain, he had advanced by 1 stage. How could they endure that? Yu Yiming had such a change mainly because Su Zimo had helped him to be reborn, and laid a foundation for him. As his cultivation increased, his cultivation speed would gradually slow down and return to normal. In fact, it was not only Yu Yiming. For example, Xia Qingying, Duan Tianliang, and the rest of the people from the lower domain, who had suddenly come to such a rich cultivation environment, and been washed by the rain. Their realms also had different degrees of loosening. There were even people in the crowd who had begun to break through to the Earth origin realm. At this moment, Yu Hao's eyes moved as he saw a familiar figure in the crowd. "Look, isn't that the original Dragon Abyss City Lord, Su Shi?" Yu Hao pointed at a person not far away and asked softly, Xia Qingying, Duan Tianliang. And the rest looked over, and their eyes lit up as they nodded. Xia Qingying said, the one beside him should be his child Su Xiaotian. Su Shi and Su Xiaotian had left the Dragon Abyss planet back then, and there was no news of them. They did not expect to meet here today. Su Xiaotian's cultivation is already higher than his father's. Yu Hao used his divine sense to check and murmured softly. He was only a first-stage Earth immortal, so he could not check the exact cultivation level of Su Shi and his son. He could only determine that both of them were Earth immortals, far stronger than him. As if sensing that someone was checking, Su Shi looked over and saw Yu Hao, Xia Qingying, and the rest. He was slightly startled, then walked over in surprise. Fellow Taoist Yu, fellow Taoist Xia, long time no see. Su Shi cupped his fists and greeted them from afar. The people from the Wind Snow Ridge also hurried over. Speaking of which, they were old friends from the Dragon Abyss planet. Without this experience, it would be difficult for them to meet again in the future. Now that they were reunited here, everyone was a little emotional and couldn't help but exchange some pleasantries. Fellow Taoist Su, where will you stay after leaving the Dragon Abyss planet? Yu Hao asked. It's a long story. Su Shi sighed softly and briefly recounted what had happened after he and Su Xiaotian had gone to the Divine Firmament Celestial Realm. Back then, for Su Zimo's sake, Xia Qingqing brought the two of them with her. However, they didn't expect that Xia Qingqing would meet with a mishap, and the two of them would almost die as well. Later on, they managed to escape from death and returned to Xia Qingqing's side. Now they had joined Qiankuan Academy. Who did you come with? Su Shi asked. Yu Hao said, it was only because fellow Taoist Su came looking for us that we decided to leave Dragon Abyss planet. Su Shi smiled and said, to be able to make the Realm Lord personally come out, I'm afraid only you few old friends. Huh. Sector Lord. Yu Hao, Xia Qingying, and the others were stunned, not understanding. Duan Tianliang and the others thought they had misheard, so they didn't pay much attention to it. Xia Qingying blinked and could not help but ask, fellow Taoist Su, were you talking about the Realm Master just now? Yes. Su Shi nodded. Ah, I got it. Yu Hao came to a realization and said, among the group of people who came with fellow Taoist Su that day, one of them was the Realm Lord of this realm. Is it that expert with lightning in his eyes? I saw him attack just now. Hearing that, Su Shi laughed and said, the Realm Lord is the fellow Taoist Su you're talking about. Ah. Everyone in Wind Snow Ridge was shocked when they heard that. For the past year, they had been staying in the cabin and did not know the cultivators around them, nor did they interact much. Su Xiaotian smiled and said, the expert with lightning in his eyes you mentioned just now is the Heaven Baron Sex Lord of Heaven's Wrath. Xia Qingying and the others were shocked. So the person who went to Wind Snow Ridge with Su Zimo was the Lord of Heaven's Wrath. I've heard of that before. Yu Hao nodded hurriedly and said, I also heard that this Lord of Heaven's Wrath is extremely strong. He even killed King Jin and destroyed the entire Dajin Celestial Kingdom. Something like that. Su Shi nodded and said, that matter is mainly controlled by the Realm Lord. Everyone was shocked again when they heard that. The destruction of the Dajin Celestial Kingdom was single-handedly led by Su Zimo? Yu Hao seemed to realize something and swallowed his saliva. He could not help but ask, Su Dao, cough cough, the Realm Lord's cultivation realm is Grotto Heaven Realm. Su Shi said 3 words. Grotto Heaven Realm. This realm was too far away for the people in Wind Snow Ridge, but they all knew that the Grotto Heaven Realm was the king. Oh my god. Duan Tianliang was stunned and muttered, what has Boss Su experienced in the past 10,000 years? Su Shi continued, although they are all in the Grotto Heaven Realm, the Lord of Heaven's Wrath should not be a match for the Realm Lord. After all, Su Shi and Duan Tianliang were by Xia Qingqing's side and knew more about Su Zimo. They also knew that Su Zimo had once suppressed the quasi-emperor expert, the secluded Cloud King. So Su, the Realm Lord's realm is the highest among them, compared to the Warlord and Immortal King creation. Xia Qingying asked, Immortal King creation? Su Shi was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, Immortal King creation was probably spread by some meddlesome people. The Realm Lord has the body of Qinglian creation, so he gave him this title. As for the Realm Lord's cultivation realm, it should not be the highest. The Warlord is currently a quasi-emperor, but everyone still recognizes Brother Su as the Realm Lord. In fact, no one had any objections to the position of the Realm Lord. On one hand, Su Zimo created this realm to give the beings of the lower domain a place to live, and it would not affect the development of the various forces. The title of Realm Lord was more like an empty title. On the other hand, Lin Zhan, Feng Cantian, and the others were aware of Su Zimo's true strength. Behind him was Emperor Araki Takeshi. Even if they were ranked according to cultivation realm, Su Zimo could only be the Realm Lord. Does this realm have a name? Yu Hao asked. Heaven Wasteland Domain. Su Shi said, the Realm Lord, Lord of Heaven's Wrath, Warlord, and Immortal King Ling Long all came from Heaven Wasteland Continent. The Realm Lord's original intention in creating this realm was to protect his many old friends from Heaven Wasteland Continent. In the air, Lin Zhan, Immortal King Ling Long, Feng Cantian, and the others stood in the air, feeling the changes in Heaven Wasteland Domain. While they were gratified, they also felt a little regretful. Lin Zhan shook his head slightly and sighed. I didn't expect that the power of the 12th grade creation Qinglian would not be able to restore the vitality of the 4 spirit roots. Everyone could feel that under the influence of Qinglian creation, the yuan qi of Heaven Wasteland Domain had become very rich. Green sprouts had also sprouted on the 4 spirit roots. But in reality, this was only the appearance that was born under Qinglian creation's enormous vitality. No new roots grew under the ground of the 4 spirit roots. This meant that if Qinglian creation left, Heaven Wasteland Domain would still not have its own spirit roots, and the yuan qi of Heaven Wasteland Domain would gradually dissipate and eventually dry up. Chapter 3145. If this problem was not solved, the scene in front of the Heaven Wasteland Domain would be nothing more than a dream. Su Zimo could not stay in the Heaven Wasteland Domain forever. After all, he was a human and not a true spirit root. Feng Cantian said. If even the 12th grade creation Qinglian cannot save these 4 spirit roots, I really don't know what else can be done. Actually, it's not that the creation Qinglian is not strong enough. Immortal King Ling Long said. The creation Qinglian can provide enough vitality. Look at the flowers, plants, and trees on this land, they have all recovered. Lin Zhan shook his head and said, but these flowers, plants, and trees are just ordinary things. They don't need a good environment. The 4 spirit roots of the 7 Wonders tree are rare immortal seeds in the world. The requirements for their growth are also very strict. Indeed, Immortal King Ling Long nodded and said, if we can change the soil of this land, there may be a chance for a change. It's too difficult. Feng Cantian sighed and said, this land has been abandoned for many years. It's probably more than several eras. It's almost impossible to change it overnight. To be able to do what we see now is already comparable to a miracle. Su Zimo stood in the air and closed his eyes deep in thought. He was also thinking of a solution. Hearing the conversation of Immortal King Ling Long and the other 2, he had an idea that he could try. When he ascended to the lower domain and transcended the tribulation, his creation Qinglian could give birth to a supreme treasure of heaven and earth, which was the living soil of the 9 heavens. At the same time, there was also an inheritance memory related to the living soil of the 9 heavens. The living soil of the 9 heavens looked like an ordinary piece of yellow soil, but in the inheritance memory, it was recorded that the living soil of the 9 heavens was the ancestral source of earth. It was endlessly mysterious and was born from chaos. A part of the living soil of the 9 heavens turned into the 9 heavens, and another part gave birth to the creation Qinglian. At that time, Su Zimo did not fully understand this inheritance memory. Now that he thought about it, the 9 Supremes Emperors must have relied on the living soil to create the 9 heavens between the middle world and the greater world. If the living soil of the 9 heavens was the ancestral root of earth, and could even nurture the creation Qinglian, it was not impossible for it to restore the vitality of the 4 spirit roots. However, The 9-heaven life soil that fell into Su Zimo's hands was only a small handful, and it was unknown if it would be of any use. When he thought up to here, Su Zimo didn't hesitate any longer, and withdrew the life soil of the 9-heaven before waving his hand and sprinkling it onto the ground beneath his feet. The living soil of the 9 heavens landed on the ground and quickly fused with it, disappearing without a trace. However, Su Zimo could clearly sense that the land beneath him was undergoing earth-shaking changes. Just a small amount of 9 heavens life soil was enough to transform this land. The grass and trees on the ground seemed to have been stimulated by something as they rapidly grew. Originally, they were just tender saplings, but in the blink of an eye, they had grown into towering trees. The 7 Wonders tree was the first to recover. After all, this spirit root had just been moved over from the Crimson Heaven Immortal domain, and its roots were still intact. Now that it was in the living soil of the 9 heavens, thousands of roots extended and took root in the depths of the ground once more. The 7 treasures on the tree trunk gradually shone with a brilliant radiance as well. After the 7 Wonders tree recovered, it began to absorb the essence chi of the middle world as well. Following closely behind was the sapling of the immortal peach tree. This sapling sprouted a few emerald green buds, and in a short period of time, a large section of it sprang up, becoming much thicker. The immortal willow also gradually grew roots, taking root in the ground and extending out. On the withered tree trunk, a tender green willow branch grew out, gently swaying with the wind, as if expressing some kind of joyful and excited emotion. The last to recover was the worryless tree. As one of the 3 sacred trees of Buddhism, this worryless tree had long lost its vitality after being trapped in the Avicii hell for too long. Now, under the double stimulation of the living soil of the 9 heavens in Qinglian, it gradually recovered its vitality and took root here, absorbing the essence chi of the world and gradually growing branches. Among the 4 spirit roots, the worryless tree was the last to recover, but the vitality in the tree trunk was the most vigorous. Back then, Buddha was born under the worryless tree. The worryless tree itself nurtured a kind of Tao of life. The 4 spirit roots all recovered their vitality and began to absorb the essence chi of the world. In addition to the 12th grade Qinglian, the density of the essence chi of the world in Heaven Wasteland domain had far exceeded that of the Heaven domain. Seeing this scene, Lin Zhan, Feng Cantian and the others smiled and looked at each other, finally relieved. At this point, Heaven Wasteland domain had truly established itself in the middle world and become one of the 3,000 domains. The tiger, Qing Qing, the little fox, and the golden lion flew into the air, and each took out a spirit treasure that could imprison life, releasing countless living beings. There were ferocious beasts like tigers and leopards, fish and prawns that roamed the rivers, as well as tiny and weak insects. There were also many rare and exotic beasts. These were all captured by the few of them before leaving Great Wasteland domain. They knew that Su Zimo was preparing to create a domain, and with more living beings, there would be more vitality. These living beings were captured and imprisoned for more than a year, and were originally full of resentment. But after coming to Heaven Wasteland domain, this group of birds and beasts instantly became extremely excited. Compared to Great Wasteland domain, this was simply a paradise. The beasts returned to the mountains, the birds returned to the forest, the flood dragons returned to the sea, and the phoenixes returned to their nests. Heaven Wasteland domain was full of vitality and was in the ascendant. Seeing this scene, Yang Ruoxa sighed emotionally. I was originally worried that we might not be able to find a suitable place to build an academy in the new domain, but now, the Crimson Rainbow Fairy smiled and said, now, as long as it's in Heaven Wasteland domain, no matter where our academy is built, the environment will be much better than before. On Heaven Wasteland domain, mountains stood tall and clouds lingered. It was no exaggeration to say that every mountain was a rare spiritual mountain. Elder Xian could not help but laugh. Originally, half of my body was already in the ground, but looking at the situation, I reckon that I can last for a few more years, haha. A crack appeared in the void not far away, and a huge immortal boat appeared. There were dozens of beautiful women with graceful figures standing on top of it. Moreover, their cultivation was not weak, and many of them were kings, and there were even a few quasi-emperor experts. On this immortal boat, there were hundreds of millions of Rakshasa, who were imprisoned in the Rakshasa-sinned land. These Rakshasa were originally hiding in the place of inheritance of the 9 Netherworld Emperor. Now that they had received a notice from Wu Dao, they rushed here. In that mysterious place, the surrounding yuan qi of heaven and earth was thin, and it was possible to hide temporarily, but not suitable for cultivation. In fact, these Rakshasa were imprisoned in the Rakshasa-sinned land, because many of them were restricted by the laws of the sinned land, and were unable to break through to the next realm. After escaping, some of the Rakshasa became quasi-emperors in a short time. Now in a dangerous place like Heaven Wasteland Domain, these Rakshasa continued to cultivate, and in the future, there would be more kings, quasi-emperors, and even emperor experts. In fact, the group of creatures in the Infernal Court were facing a similar situation. Many of the Infernal Court creatures were no longer in the Infernal Court, but Wu Dao's true body secretly brought them to the Great Wasteland Domain through the gates of hell. With the help of the complete heaven and earth of the middle world, and the perfect Dao techniques, they broke through the bottleneck and stepped into the Emperor realm. In other words, Su Zimo's 2 true bodies had in fact controlled the Rakshasa and Infernal Court, 2 huge armies with unlimited potential. Chapter 3146. Sky Tribute Realm. Secret Realm Hall. 6 realm lords of the Sky Tribute Realm sat side by side in the middle. Dozens of imperial emperors sat on both sides of the hall. 6 realm lords and so many imperial emperors had appeared at the same time. There must be something important to discuss. There's some news from the heaven realm. An imperial emperor said. It's worth noting that an immortal king named Su Zimo, who has the body of a grade 12 creation realm Qinglian, led a group of beings from the lower worlds, and caused a ruckus in the 9 Clouds immortal realm. They destroyed a realm, 2 immortal kingdoms, and killed several immortal kings before retreating unscathed. Oh, one of the realm lords was a little surprised. This realm lord had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was obviously a Protoss. However, after coming to the Sky Tribute realm, he had to give up his identity and title as a Protoss. He was called the Sky Tribute Divine Emperor. Sky Tribute Divine Emperor said, an immortal king caused a ruckus in the 9 Clouds immortal realm. No imperial emperor showed up? No. The imperial emperor said, I heard that there were several imperial emperors secretly protecting Su Zimo. I heard that there were 2 realm lords from the Kuanpeng realm, the new dragon realm lord, and Sword Realm's Imperial Emperor Taiguan. Although Su Zimo came from the lower worlds, he seems to have some connections with these super worlds. Otherwise, they wouldn't have supported him. Another Imperial Emperor said, Su Zimo is actually the first burial sword peak lord of Sword Realm Suzhu. That's why he has a close relationship with Sword Realm. Back then, in the Fiend battlefield, this kid comprehended many supreme divine powers and became invincible. Realm Lord should have seen him before. It's him? Another Realm Lord raised his eyebrows. This Realm Lord used to be from the Stone race, but after joining the Sky Tribute Realm, he gave up his old title and was now called the Sky Tribute Stone Monarch. Back in the Battle of the Fiend battlefield, Su Zimo killed more than 20 supreme true spirits alone and was invincible. That attracted their attention as well. Most importantly, Su Zimo's release of the Dao technique from the heaven-bearing scripture had alerted them. How many years has it been? That kid has already stepped into the Grotto Heaven realm. His cultivation speed is really fast. Another sector lord murmured. That 9 Firmaments immortal emperor didn't intervene? Heaven worship God Emperor asked. He hasn't shown himself since the beginning. Another monarch replied. The 6 skyward realm lords fell into deep thought. Rock Emperor Feng Tian frowned and said, in that case, could it be that this child is related to Great Emperor Zong Tian? One more thing. Another sovereign emperor said sullenly. 10 odd Rakshasa sinful spirits appeared beside this Su Zimo. Their cultivations are not weak. Aside from sovereign personages, there are even quasi-emperors. The eyes of the 6 skyward realm lords lit up. After the Rakshasa sinful land was destroyed, hundreds of millions of Rakshasa sinful spirits seemed to have evaporated from the world, disappearing without a trace. For many years, there had been no news or traces of him. To think that more than a dozen Rakshasa ghost kings and a Rakshasa quasi-emperor would suddenly appear. Interesting. Heaven Worship Rock Emperor smirked and said faintly, "As long as we keep an eye on this Su Zimo and follow this clue, we will definitely be able to find the rest of the Rakshasa sinful spirits." One of the monarchs said. This Su Zimo led a group of lower domain beings to the central thousand-border wastelands and created a domain called Heaven Wasteland Domain. I even suspect that those Rakshasa sinful spirits are hiding in this domain. Another monarch said coldly, "The strongest cultivator in this domain is only a quasi-emperor. Should we attack now? I'll bring a few people and destroy this domain in half a day. If those Rakshasa sinful spirits are hiding there, we'll kill them all." "There's no hurry." Heaven Worship God Emperor narrowed his eyes and said, "If we attack Heaven Wasteland Domain, the other domains won't dare to act recklessly, but Sword Realm is likely to interfere." "How dare they?" Heaven Worship Rock Emperor slammed the table and said loudly, "If Sword Realm dares to interfere, they'll be going against the Heavenly Court. I don't mind destroying Sword Realm first." Stone Realm and Sword Realm had a grudge that went back several eras. If there was an excuse to destroy Sword Realm, Heaven Worship Rock Emperor wouldn't mind doing so. Heaven Worship World had lost dozens of monarchs in the Battle of the Great Wilderness, but there were still more than 100 monarchs in their domain. In the 3,000 domains, there was still no domain that could fight against them. Heaven Worship God Emperor said, "It's not just Sword Realm. If the Rakshasa sinful spirits were really hidden by Su Zimo, it means that there should be someone behind Heaven Wasteland Domain who can destroy the sinful land. Now it seems that it's very likely to be one of the three from Heaven World." Another realm lord frowned and said, "If it involves buried heaven, this matter will be a bit complicated. I'm afraid we'll have to ask the Heavenly Court for help." "That's right," Heaven Worship God Emperor said in a low voice. "Last time in the Great Wilderness Domain, our Heaven Worship World suffered heavy losses. Dozens of monarchs died, and our vitality was greatly damaged. If anything goes wrong the next time we attack, Heaven Worship World's prestige will be completely gone. The next time we attack, we must be well prepared and foolproof. The best way is to ask the Heavenly Court for help. It would be best if an Inspector Heavenly Ambassador comes personally." There were only 9 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors in the 9 heavens. Other than the 9 monarchs, only the strongest monarchs were qualified to be Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors. If something big happened in the 3,000 domains, Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors could come down and replace the 9 monarchs to patrol the races in the universe. They had the supreme power to decide the life and death of others. If an Inspector Heavenly Ambassador comes, it probably means that the Heavenly Court is preparing to suppress the demons. It's about time. Although a monarch hasn't been born in a middle world, an anomaly has appeared in the Great Wilderness Domain. It would be best if we can kill it in advance." And Monarch asked, "How long do we have to wait?" Heaven Worship God Emperor said, "Not too long. Last time, the 3 young masters of the Heavenly Court returned in defeat. They are all angry and want to make a comeback. They definitely won't miss this opportunity. With the resources of the Heavenly Court, they will recover in about 100 years. There will naturally be a response then." Heaven Worship Rock Emperor looked at the monarchs below and said, "In this period of time, keep a close eye on the movements of Sword World and Heaven Wasteland Domain. But don't act rashly to avoid alerting the enemy." "Yes." The monarchs all stood up. Heaven Worship Rock Emperor's eyes were cold and murderous. He said slowly, "The next time we attack, it will be the battle to establish our prestige." Although no domain dared to challenge their position after the Heaven Worship World's defeat, it was inevitable that there would be a lot of criticism in private. The Celestial Tribute World needed a great victory to re-establish its supremacy in the 3,000 worlds. "That's right." Heaven Worship God Emperor's expression was cold. He looked at the stars and said indifferently, "Chaos is coming. It's time to tell the beings of the 3,000 domains how to choose and stand." Chapter 3147. Light World. Outside the Light Palace, the million-strong Protoss army was gathered. Their armor shone with golden light, their spears and swords emitted endless sharpness, and their war flags fluttered in the wind. 3 god emperors stepped into the palace. The Lord of the Light World sat in the middle of the palace. His expression was dignified, and his eyes shone with a dazzling brilliance. No one dared to look him in the eye. "Lord, the army has been assembled. We can move at any time to Heaven Wasteland Domain to kill the dark sinful spirit," one of the god emperors said in a deep voice. "Let's disperse first." The Lord of the Light World suddenly spoke. The 3 god emperors frowned slightly. One of them asked, "Lord, why is that so?" The Lord of the Light World pointed to the sky and said, "I just received a reply from the Heaven Reverence God Emperor. He told the Protoss to stay put and wait for news from the Heavenly Court." The Heavenly Court. The 3 god emperors' hearts trembled. One of the god emperors was shocked and said, "Even the Heavenly Court has been alerted." "Not really," the Lord of the Light World explained. "The Heaven Reverence World should be preparing to use this opportunity to establish their power. The Heavenly Court will also send people down. At that time, they won't just be dealing with a small Heaven Wasteland domain. 100 years was too short for the many living beings in the middle world. Many living beings would often go into seclusion for thousands or tens of thousands of years. 100 years was just a blink of an eye, but for Heaven Wasteland Domain, 100 years was enough to create earth-shaking changes. With Su Zimo's 12th grade creation Qinglian in the center, and the 4 great spirit roots in the surroundings, they crazily absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the middle world. The creation Green Lotus could even steal a lot of rich essence energy from the heavenly courts. This caused the Heaven Wasteland Domain to change with each passing day in just 100 years, and the world had changed greatly. Apart from the Heaven Wasteland sect, there were many other forces of various sizes on this land. There was Qianquan Academy, the Warring States Academy, and the Wind and Snow Ridge. Under the influence of immortal King Ling Long, Enigma Palace was established in Heaven Wasteland Domain. Chess deity Junyu followed Su Zimo and became the first palace master of Enigma Palace. Although Junyu had never taken immortal King Ling Long as her master, she had inherited and comprehended the most Daos. The first storyteller of the Enigma Palace in the upper realm was none other than Lin Xuanji. The existence of storytellers was extremely special in the Enigma Palace, and they bore the responsibility of establishing the words. The so-called oath was to record history, pass down merit, pass down civilization, and inherit the great Tao. On Tianhuang mainland, the dark and tragic days of the human race in the primordial age, and the rise of the various emperors in the primordial age, were all recorded by Enigma Palace and spread by storytellers. The current Lin Xuanji was still the most mysterious 10th elder of Qianquan Academy. However, Lin Xuanji loved being a storyteller the most. With his temperament, he couldn't stay idle at all and wanted to talk to someone. That period of time in Qianquan Academy almost drove him crazy. On this day, Lin Zhan and the others came to the main hall of Heaven Wasteland Domain. They found Su Zimo and suggested, "Zimo, 100 years have passed. Heaven Wasteland Domain has stabilized and is beginning to take shape. I suggest that we invite the domain lords of some domains over as guests. On the one hand, it's to make friends with those domains and establish a connection. On the other hand, people like the Master of the Sword Domain, the 2 domain lords of the Kuan-Peng Domain, the Master of the Dragon Domain, and the others helped us back then. This invitation is also a form of gratitude." Su Zimo pondered for a moment and nodded. All right. Back then, he had promised Yunju that he would invite her over to take a look after the establishment of a new domain. He could make use of this opportunity to let Yunju come over. Su Zimo did not have any connections with most of the domains in the 3,000 upper realms. Most of his old friends were in Heaven Wasteland Domain right now. After thinking for a moment, Su Zimo wrote a few invitation letters and left teleportation runes outside. Finally, he tossed them to the Sword Domain, Dragon Domain, Flower Domain, Heaven Domain, Blood Ape Domain and Kuan-Peng Domain. These invitation letters turned into streaks of light and disappeared into the void. Right then, Su Zimo sensed a massive energy fluctuation coming from the east of Heaven Wasteland domain. Someone was breaking through to the Grotto Heaven realm. That was the direction of Qianquan Academy. Su Zimo bade farewell to everyone and arrived above Qianquan Academy. Scanning with his spirit consciousness, he saw Emo Qing on a mountain peak with her eyes closed. Her Dao fruit floated in front of her, and she was accumulating power to break through the void. Her slender fingers were like white jade brushes that danced lightly in the air, leaving behind a series of incomparably beautiful traces. The Dao and techniques revealed by those traces were fused into the Dao fruit. Her aura was also rising along with the power of the Dao fruit. Su Zimo did not leave, and stayed behind to protect Emo Qing. There were many cultivators of the academy standing around the mountain peak. When they saw Su Zimo appear, they heaved a sigh of relief. Lin Xuanji was not in the academy all year round, and Elder Xian was too old to make a move. No one in the academy could help Emo Qing break through to the Grotto Heaven realm. If something were to happen, everyone would be helpless. The domain lord is here. Don't worry, everyone. When Yang Ruoxa saw Su Zimo appear, he cupped his fists and chuckled. Su Zimo nodded as well. For some reason, Emo Qing, who had been progressing smoothly, seemed to have heard something. His aura suddenly became unstable and chaotic. If this continued, there was a risk of qi deviation. Su Zimo frowned slightly, and was not in a hurry to make a move. Why did this happen all of a sudden? Everything was fine earlier on. Right then, Emo Qing suddenly opened her eyes and looked in the direction of Su Zimo. A wisp of extremely complicated emotions appeared on her elegant and beautiful face, and it seemed like she was angry yet resentful, angry yet embarrassed. Emo Qing was obsessed with the Tao of painting, and her state of mind was always calm like an immortal in a painting. She had never had such an expression before. At this moment, she was like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. Her eyes were filled with resentment and emotions, and were unprecedentedly moving. Even with Su Zimo's state of mind, he was slightly dazed. However, when he saw that Emo Qing's condition was not good, he did not have time to think. He hurriedly used his divine consciousness to communicate with her, and softly recited a Buddhist scripture. Everything is like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow like dew or lightning. Senior Sister Emo Qing, clear your mind of distracting thoughts and guard your soul. This scripture was indeed useful. Moreover, Su Zimo had used a Buddhist sound domain technique. It was like a blow to the head that woke Emo Qing up. Emo Qing took a deep breath and closed her eyes again. However, her expression was still somewhat complicated. After a while, her aura gradually stabilized. It's all your fault. Right then, the ice butterfly ran in front of Su Zimo and said angrily, "If you didn't come, nothing would have happened to her. What does this have to do with me?" Su Zimo was baffled. Just as he was about to speak, Emo Qing's angry and resentful face flashed in his mind. Su Zimo frowned secretly. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he secretly took out the painting that Emo Qing gave him from his storage bag and slowly unfolded it. When he saw the person in the painting, Su Zimo was stunned. That person had black hair and was wearing a purple robe. He held a silver mask in his hand that seemed to have just been taken off. It was obvious that it was Wu Dao in the painting. The face of the person in the painting was exactly the same as his. Emo Qing already knew. Emo Qing's name was not at the bottom of the painting. There was only one word. Humph. Chapter 3148. Celestial Tribute World. A huge crack suddenly appeared in the sky above the mystic realm, emitting waves of terrifying pressure, alarming all the celestial emperors in the celestial tribute world to come out of seclusion. Only people from the heavenly court could descend into this mystic realm at will. The 6 celestial tribute world lords appeared immediately. They knelt on the huge square with respectful expressions, welcoming the arrival of the heavenly court's people. Figures gradually emerged from the crack, each of them exuding a terrifying and sharp aura. All of them were celestial emperors. Among the few people standing at the front, 3 of them were the 3 heavenly court's young masters, who had returned after suffering a crushing defeat: Celestial Emperor Qin Yan, Celestial Emperor Bai Yu, and Celestial Emperor Xian Can. Soon, this group of heavenly courts experts had all descended into the celestial tribute world. There were a total of 200 of them, all of them celestial emperors. Everyone in the celestial tribute world was secretly shocked. The heavenly court's foundation was simply unfathomable and unimaginable. Although the War of the Heavens would erupt every epoch, the main battlefield of the War of the Heavens would always be in the middle world. The heavenly court had never suffered much of an impact. With the 9 heavens as the court, it sealed the most condensed and concentrated heaven-earth essence chi in the middle world, and left it in the heavenly court, allowing the heavenly court to have a unique environment. In addition, the heavenly court was always the final victor of the Great War of the Heavens, allowing the heavenly court to have countless treasures, cultivation techniques, and secret manuals. Under such circumstances, the difficulty of cultivating in the heavenly court and stepping into the celestial emperor realm was much lower than in the middle world. This also led to the heavenly court having more celestial emperors. The 200 celestial emperors that had descended from the heavenly court could be clearly divided into 4 camps, according to the identity token at their waists. The eastern Song sky, the southern Yin sky, the western White sky, and the northern Black sky. Previously, these 4 heavens had descended. However, there were only about 30 celestial emperors from the 4 heavens. This time, Song sky, Yin sky, White sky, and Black sky had each sent 50 celestial emperors, making a total of 200 celestial emperors. Other than the 3 young masters, there were also 4 inspector heavenly ambassadors. From this, it could be seen how important the heavenly court's trip to the middle world was. In front of the 4 camps, 4 inspector heavenly ambassadors with terrifying auras. Even the heavenly court's young master's position was half a body's length behind the inspector heavenly ambassador. In the Yin Tian camp, there was no new Yin Tian young master. There was only the Yin Tian inspector heavenly ambassador. Dressed in a flaming robe, he had crimson hair and a vermilion face. His eyes burned brightly. Just by standing there with his hands behind his back, the surrounding void was already distorted from the heat. Welcome, for Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors, 3 young masters, and all the Empyrean emperors of the heavenly courts. The 6 skyward realm lords shouted loudly. More than 100 imperial emperors of the celestial realm chimed in. Get up! The firmament inspector heavenly ambassador said plainly. He descended with the other celestial court's emperors and entered the heavenly worship hall. It wasn't until all 200 celestial emperors had entered the hall that the 6 celestial reverence realm lords dared to stand up and quickly followed. We've all seen your message. The emissary inspector heavenly ambassador continued. Fully open the treasure pagoda and the exchange of war achievements, so that the 3,000 worlds can prepare for the war of slaying demons. The 6 skyward realm overlords were shocked. Under normal circumstances, the treasure pagoda would only be opened to the 5th floor. Only when the world was in chaos would it be fully opened. Above the 5th floor of the treasure pagoda, there were treasures that kings and Empyrean emperors needed, and the amount of war achievements required was even higher. In the Fiend battlefield, killing a Unity Stage True Spirit would only give 1 war achievement. Killing a Dongshi Stage True Spirit would only give 10 war achievement. And if one wanted to exchange for king-level treasures, the war achievement requirement would easily be in the tens of thousands. Every time before the world was in chaos, the celestial reverence realm would fully open the treasure pagoda and the exchange of war achievements. Killing a Grotto Heaven sinful spirit could be exchanged for 100 war achievement. Killing a Grotto Heaven sinful spirit could be exchanged for 250 war achievement. Killing a Grotto Heaven sinful spirit could be exchanged for 500 war achievement. If one could kill an ordinary Empyrean emperor among the sinful spirits, they could even obtain 1,000 war achievement. Under the temptation of huge benefits, even if the celestial reverence realm and the heavenly courts didn't force them, many experts of the 3,000 worlds would take the initiative to kill the sinful spirits. This was the greatest meaning of the treasure pagoda and the Fiend battlefield's existence. The celestial reverence realm was opened once every 10,000 years to kill sinful spirits, obtain war achievement, and exchange for treasures. This kind of influence was imperceptible and had already seeped into their bones. Of course, this was only the first step in the war against demons, but the temptation of benefits might not be able to make the majority of the experts of the 3,000 worlds work for the heavenly courts. They also needed absolute power and the baptism of blood to make the 3,000 worlds fear the heavenly courts, so that they could only be controlled by the heavenly courts to resist the demons. In order to make all living beings fear, they had to establish their power. Only the stimulation of fresh blood could have an immediate effect. What arrangements do the 4 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors have? The Celestial Reverence Emperor asked. The White Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador said, "Since Su Zimo of the Heaven Wasteland Domain has a close relationship with the Sword World, we will split into 2 groups. The Emperors of the White Sky, Xian Sky, and Yin Sky will follow me to the Sword World. Firmament, you will bring people to the Heaven Wasteland Domain." The Heaven Wasteland Domain was just a new domain, and didn't even have an emperor. The appearance of the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador, Emperor Blue Flame, and the other 50 emperors of the heavenly courts was enough respect for the Heaven Wasteland Domain. The Fontian Rock Emperor suddenly said, "If we go to the Sword World, and those 3 old things suddenly become enlightened and choose to submit to the heavenly courts, do we still have to act?" The White Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador smiled and said, "We are not going to the Sword World to make it submit, but to kill people and establish our power. Whether the Sword World submits or not, there is no need for it to continue existing." Understood. The Fontian Rock Emperor was overjoyed and said, "I suggest that you go to the Sky Eye Domain, Stone Domain, Blood Domain, and Golden Crow Domain first. These domains have all been on bad terms with the Sword World over the years. We can also use this opportunity to make these domains express their stance. When the time comes, there may not be a need for you and the Fontian Domain to act. Just these domains alone will be enough to destroy the Sword World." Yes, this is a good idea. The White Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador nodded. The Fontian God Emperor also hurriedly suggested, "My lords, I heard that Su Zimo has recently invited the Sword World, Dragon World, and other super domains to visit the Heaven Wasteland Domain as guests. The Protoss has long wanted to go to the Heaven Wasteland Domain to kill the dark sinful spirits. When the time comes, we can ask the Light World to send the Protoss army to follow you and give the Heaven Wasteland Domain a surprise." The Fontian God Emperor's eyes flashed with excitement when he said this. The Light World had wanted to make a move 100 years ago, but he had suppressed it and waited for this day. All right. The Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador nodded. Emperor Blue Flame just sneered and was not interested in this at all. He didn't even care about the Heaven Wasteland Domain that was founded by the Immortal King. This time, at most, he would kill a few people to vent his anger. The Great Wasteland Domain was still his not. Chapter 3149. Emperor Qing Yin felt bored and could not help but say, "Let the Celestial Tribute Domain and the Sword Domain join forces with the other domains to deal with them. Let's go to the Great Wasteland Domain." "We will definitely go to the Great Wasteland Domain," the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador said. "But now is not the time. In a few days, the remaining 5 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors will also bring people down. When the time comes, we will naturally meet Emperor Araki Takashi. With 4 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors and 200 Emperors, can't we defeat Araki Takashi?" Emperor Qing Yin frowned. Araki Takashi is not that strong. If not for a flaw in the 4 corners constellation formation, he would not have won. The Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador said, "These people are definitely enough to kill Araki Takashi, but to minimize the casualties of the Heavenly Court, we should wait for the other Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors to arrive. When the time comes, we will join forces and not give him any chance." Originally, the Heavenly Court did not plan to appear so quickly, because Emperor Qing Yin and the other 2 young masters were still holding back their anger and wanted to return to the Middle World. The 4 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors brought people down in advance. The Celestial Tribute Emperor coughed softly and said, "My lords, We heard that there is a Heaven Wasteland sect in the Heaven Wasteland domain, and it is very likely to be related to Araki Takashi of the Great Wasteland domain. Oh, the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador raised his eyebrows slightly. It is only a possibility, the Celestial Tribute Emperor hurriedly explained. After all, Emperor Araki Takashi did not have any contact with the Heaven Wasteland sect after he went to the Great Wasteland domain. It is probably a small sect that he casually created, and he may not even care about it. The Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador pondered and said, "This is simple. When the time comes, we will completely seal off the Heaven Wasteland domain, and no news will spread." Since they had decided to show their might, the Heavenly Court naturally would not give the Sword domain and the Heaven Wasteland domain any chance. "Let's go." The Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador patted Emperor Qing Yan's shoulder and said, "I heard that there may be many Rakshasa hidden in the Heaven Wasteland domain, and those Rakshasa girls are all stunning. You can pick a batch." At the mention of this, Emperor Qing Yan was a little tempted. He nodded. Within the spatial tunnel, a huge classical ship was sailing towards the desolate lands of the dimensional realm. The ship had a total of 9 floors and was 1,000 feet tall. Many figures could be seen on each floor. There were immortal soldiers dressed in armor and wielding halberds. There were also palace maids with voluptuous figures dressed in gauze. Waves of celestial music came from the ship, and a fragrance lingered in the air. It was extraordinary. There was a figure standing at the bow of the ship. He was wearing plain clothes and had an ancient scroll in his hand. He only glanced at it occasionally and seemed to be absent-minded. "Yinju," a deep voice came from behind. A man in a yellow robe, surrounded by many palace maids and guards, slowly walked over. His bearing was extraordinary and quite majestic. Hearing his voice, Yinju turned around and called out, "Father." The person who had come was Immortal King Zishuan. "I've already said that Su Zimo's idea of opening an interface was too naive." Immortal King Zishuan pointed at the surroundings and said, "Look, where are we? The surrounding starry sky is desolate. The heaven and earth Yuan Qi is almost dried up. What development can he have by establishing an interface in such a place? How many people are willing to come here?" Yinju was silent. The surrounding scene was indeed as Immortal King Zishuan said. She had nothing to refute. However, if she had a choice, she was willing to come. Immortal King Zishuan said, "Back then, you advised me to move the Zishuan Immortal Kingdom here, but I rejected you. Now you understand." Yinju was still silent. Immortal King Zishuan sighed softly and said earnestly, "Yinju, you've read a lot of books. In this aspect, I can't compare to you. However, there are some things that you can't learn from books. Just in this aspect, I'm much better than you." Yunju looked at Immortal King Zishuan with a strange expression and thought to herself, "You've really misjudged me this time. That Su Zimo sent you an invitation, but you insisted on coming. You even brought me along to take a look. You just want to prove that I was wrong back then." Immortal King Zishuan smiled. "How about now? I've lived for hundreds of thousands of years. This is a judgment made through experience and insight. You can't learn it from books." "I know." Yinju smiled and gently pushed Immortal King Zishuan. "Father, quickly go back and rest. We've already agreed." Immortal King Zishuan was still worried. "When we reach Heaven Wasteland domain, you can't stay there. After congratulating me, you'll go back with me today. I can't bear to see you suffer in such a desolate and dilapidated place." At this moment, Immortal King Zishuan and Yunju, who were in the space tunnel, suddenly felt a burst of pure Yuan Qi of heaven and earth. Through the walls of the tunnel, they could see that the sky ahead was faintly suffused with tens of thousands of rays of light. "This is..." Yunju's divine thought moved, controlling the ship to break through the space tunnel and come closer. Looking at the land in front of him that was full of vitality and a myriad of phenomena, like a fairyland, Immortal King Zishuan was stunned on the spot, his expression shocked. He even thought that he was hallucinating. It was too unreal for such a fairyland to suddenly appear in the desolate land of a middle world. Before really entering Heaven Wasteland domain, Immortal King Zishuan could feel that the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth surrounding this land was rich and pure. Such a cultivation environment was far better Then the Zixian Immortal Kingdom. What kind of domain is this? Before Immortal King Zixian could react, he was greatly shocked. In the 3,000 domains, there was such a fairyland? At this moment, several figures rose up from the land. The person in the lead was the painting immortal Mo Qing of Qingquan Academy. Sister is finally here. Mo Qing came up and said with a smile. Yunju was one of the few friends that she recognized in her heart. The two had been trapped together in the Avicii hell, and had an unforgettable experience. Hey, sister has already stepped into the grotto heaven? Yunju looked at Mo Qing, her eyes brightening. Mo Qing seemed to think of something, her face slightly red, and nodded. Fairy Mo Qing, which domain is this? Immortal King Zixian could not help but interrupt and ask. Naturally Heaven Wasteland domain. Mo Qing said. Immortal King Zixian opened his mouth, as if to say something, but seeing Yunju's somewhat mischievous gaze, he was speechless for a moment. How could it be? Even if Su Zimo had the body of the 12th grade creation Qinglian, it only took him 100 years to open up such a fairyland? This was already beyond Immortal King Zixian's understanding. Mo Qing said, Sister Yunju, come with me. Junior brother Su and the others are in the main hall of Heaven Wasteland domain. Junior brother Su? Yunju looked at Mo Qing with a smile that was not a smile. Mo Qing said softly, I'm a little used to it. I can't change it for a while. Yunju smiled, and did not continue to ask, but followed Mo Qing to the sky above Heaven Wasteland domain, looking around and marveling in her heart. At this moment, Immortal King Zixian's voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Yunju cough. We don't have to leave in a hurry. After all, we came from afar. It would be rude to leave today. After Immortal King Zixian came to Heaven Wasteland domain, he felt that his realm that had been stagnant for many years was showing signs of loosening. Chapter 3150. Immortal King Zixian, with many guards and palace maids, followed behind Mo Qing and the others. Looking at the scenery around Heaven Wasteland domain, he was more and more shocked. Looking into the distance, one could see the vast blue sky, the river of stars moving, the sky connected to the clouds, and the mist was heavy. Looking around, one could see green mountains towering, rolling up and down, surrounded by green water and flourishing vegetation. There were also bejeweled jade palaces and golden palaces, either built by the mountains and rivers, or towering between the clouds on the mountain peaks. Immortal King Zixian was in Heaven Wasteland domain. The rich yuanqi of heaven and earth, like clouds and mist, lingered around him. The group of people seemed to be passing through the vast clouds, indescribably leisurely and elegant. What entered their eyes was a magnificent stretch of mountains and rivers, full of vitality. Even the best painter in the world would most likely be unable to depict it. Everything here was a work of art, like the best gift from the heavens. Along the way, Immortal King Zixian's impression of Su Zimo had greatly changed. But he was still unwilling to admit that he had misjudged, and said in a low voice, Yunju, this Su Zimo's methods are not bad, but we have come from afar, and he did not come out to greet us personally. This is impolite, this is not right. Yunju, however, did not mind, smiled and said, he must have been delayed by something. Mo Qing also said, Junior brother Su was going to come out to greet us, but there are a few guests in Heaven Wasteland domain, and he can't leave for a while. What guests are they so important? Immortal King Zixian chuckled, disapproving. In such a remote place, if Yunju had not pulled him, who else would come here? Immortal King Zixian thought that Mo Qing was finding an excuse for Su Zimo. He shook his head slightly, saying, After all, I am the ruler of a country, and my cultivation realm is higher than his. No matter what, he should come out to greet us personally. Mo Qing did not answer, and only glanced at Immortal King Zixian. Given her temperament, explaining to Immortal King Zixian was already giving face to Yunju. If it were someone else, she would not have paid attention to them. After a while, everyone had already arrived in front of the main hall of Heaven Wasteland domain. Under the lead of Mo Qing, everyone entered the main hall. Just as Immortal King Zixian stepped into the main hall, his expression changed drastically. There were indeed a few guests in this Heaven Wasteland palace. They were all unfamiliar faces, but the aura emitted by these people made immortal King Zixian tremble in fear. The guests turned their heads one after another. Their expressionless gazes landed on him with a hint of scrutiny. This was an invisible pressure. Immortal King Zixuan had once felt it when facing immortal Emperor Xin Shao. However, even when facing the divine firmament immortal emperor, he did not feel such immense pressure. Almost instantly, immortal King Zixian broke out in cold sweat. These guests were all imperial emperors. Only an imperial monarch was capable of emanating such pressure and aura. At this moment, a figure stood up from the main seat of the main hall. When he saw them enter the main hall, he walked up to them. Su Zimo cupped his fists and said, "Yunju, fellow Taoist Zixian, I was delayed by something earlier and was unable to welcome you. Please forgive me for my lack of etiquette." Yunju smiled and said, "You're too jealous. You don't have to say such things to me." Su Zimo also laughed. There was indeed no need to be so polite between the two of them. Su Zimo's words were mainly for immortal King Zixian. Immortal King Zixian had originally planned to teach Su Zimo a lesson. However, when he arrived at the main hall, he was targeted by those guests. He felt as if there was a ray of light on his body, and his forehead was covered in sweat. Not to mention teaching Su Zimo a lesson, he didn't even hear what Su Zimo said clearly. Immortal King Zixian just couldn't understand. They were both immortal kings. So how could Su Zimo remain calm and composed when facing these guests? "I heard that you're the ruler of a country. TSK, what a grand occasion." On the left side of the Heaven Wasteland Palace, a man in a dark blue robe suddenly spoke as he looked at immortal King Zixian with a mocking expression. Beside him sat a golden-haired man in a golden robe. His gaze was sharp like an eagle's as he also said, "That's right. As the rulers of a realm, we didn't bring many people over." In fact, that was indeed the case. There was only a young man standing behind these two guests. It seemed empty. Immortal King Zixian had brought many guards and palace maids here. It could be said that he was surrounded by a large entourage. Immortal King Zixian was shocked when he heard that. He hurriedly turned around and berated, "All of you disperse. Who allowed you to follow me?" The guards and palace maids felt wronged, but they didn't dare to argue. They all bowed their heads and left the hall. "I forgot to introduce them." Su Zimo pointed at the two people who had just spoken and smiled. "These two are the realm lords of the Kuan-Peng realm, North Kuan Emperor and South Kuan Emperor." Immortal King Zixian's heart trembled when he heard that. Kuan-Peng realm. Originally, the Kuan realm and the Peng realm were both super great realms. After the Kuan-Peng realm merged into one, its strength became even stronger. These two were actually the realm lords of the Kuan-Peng realm. Even the divine firmament immortal emperor had to lower his head in front of these two. Su Zimo looked at the silver-haired old woman on the right and said, "That is the new realm lord of the dragon realm, Frost Dragon Empress." What a guy! Immortal King Zixian had a terrified expression as he swallowed his saliva. He was extremely nervous and under great pressure. At this time, all experience and experience were useless, because he didn't have such experience at all. He had never seen such a powerful figure in his entire life of cultivation. And now, these big shots, who could make the 3,000 realms tremble with the stomp of their feet, were all sitting in this hall, staring at him with evil intentions. That is the Lord of the Flower Realm. That is the Blood Ape Realm Lord, Immortal King Zixian. That old ape suddenly smiled at Immortal King Zixian. His eyes flickered with a cold light as he asked faintly, "I wonder if the few of us have enough face?" Hiss! Immortal King Zixian gasped. What he had just said had been heard by these people. This Blood Ape Realm Lord's tone clearly revealed a hint of killing intent. Imperial lords could not be humiliated. He criticized these imperial lords, and they were all realm lords. He was simply courting death. Immortal King Zixian's face turned pale when he thought of this, and his legs turned weak. Yunju hurriedly supported him to prevent Immortal King Zixian from falling to his knees and embarrassing himself. Su Zimo comforted him. "The Blood Ape Realm Lord is just joking. Don't take it to heart." Hearing this, the old ape grinned and turned around, no longer scaring Immortal King Zixian. The other realm lords also stopped making things difficult for Immortal King Zixian and withdrew their gazes. They were only trying to suppress immortal King Zixian's pride. With their status, they naturally wouldn't argue with the immortal king over a few words. Since you are a guest, immortal King Zixian, please come in and have a seat. Su Zimo smiled. I wouldn't dare. Immortal King Zixian glanced at the people sitting in the hall and hurriedly waved his hand. Who is he? How could he be qualified to sit with these people? Yunju didn't care about this. She followed Mo Qing and the others into the hall and found an empty seat. She smiled at Su Zimo. Immortal King Zixian had no choice but to follow them. He didn't dare to stand, but he didn't dare to sit either. He could only look around to conceal the nervousness and awkwardness in his heart. At that instant, Immortal King Ling Long, Old Xian, and Lin Xuanji arrived and rushed into the hall with stern expressions. Chapter 3151. What's wrong? Su Zimo vaguely guessed that something must have happened when he saw that the three had arrived at the same time, and their expressions were not right. Immortal King Ling Long glanced at Emperor North Kuan, Frost Dragon Empress and the others and said hesitantly, I've been observing the weather during this period of time, and I saw that the 3,000 domains were covered in dark clouds and undercurrents were surging. It seems that something big is about to happen. Lin Xuanji said, the divination I deduced is not very good, but I can't deduce the specific direction. Elder Xian also nodded and said, I didn't deduce anything, but I feel a little uneasy these days, and I don't know the reason. I met the two of them, and found that the three of us were in a similar situation, so I came to tell you. Su Zimo frowned slightly. Emperor North Kuan and the others seemed to have thought of something when they heard this, and their expressions changed slightly. Frost Dragon Empress said, during this period, I heard that the Celestial Tribute Domain has completely opened the Treasure Pagoda and restarted the reward system. Is it related to this? Emperor North Kuan and Emperor South Rock also thought of this at the same time. Moreover, the two of them thought even further. If the Heaven Wasteland domain was facing a crisis, there were only two directions. The first was the Light Domain. The second was the Celestial Tribute Domain. For 100 years, the Celestial Tribute Domain and the Light Domain had not made any movements. They were a little puzzled and thought that the Heaven Wasteland domain had muddled through this crisis. Now, the Celestial Tribute Domain suddenly released such a signal, and it was very likely that they were beginning to settle old scores and establish their power. At this thought, Emperor North Kuan and Emperor South Rock wanted to retreat and leave the Heaven Wasteland domain as soon as possible to avoid being involved. In fact, the two of them did not intend to come. They thought that sending an envoy was already giving the Heaven Wasteland domain enough face. But Xiaoyao insisted on coming to congratulate them. And in addition to the frequent chaos in the 3,000 domains in recent years, the two of them were worried that Xiaoyao would be in danger, and so personally brought him to the Heaven Wasteland domain. The two domain lords of the Kuanpeng domain were also greatly shocked by the changes in the Heaven Wasteland domain, and were just praising it. However, the current situation, and there seemed to be some changes. The two emperors looked at each other, and tacitly got up at the same time. Emperor North Kuan said, Realm Lord Su, this trip to the Heaven Wasteland domain has indeed broadened our horizons. However, the 3,000 worlds have indeed been in chaos in recent years. We have to return to the Kuanpeng realm as soon as possible to preside over the overall situation. Monarch North Kuan's reasoning was very good, and it was hard to refuse. Su Zimo smiled and nodded. As it should be. The Frost Dragon Empress hesitated for a moment before slowly standing up as well. The Hornless Dragon King hurriedly stood up as well. The Frost Dragon Empress said, since that's the case, let's head back. Farewell. After the battle between the dragons and the phoenixes, the dragon world's vitality was greatly damaged. There were less than 10 imperial emperors, and they could no longer withstand the impact of any war. The Frost Dragon Empress did not want to put the dragon realm in danger and lead to the destruction of her race. Alright. Su Zimo could also understand this, so he didn't urge him to stay, and immediately agreed. Seeing this, the Lord of the Flower Realm also stood up to leave. Only the old ape sat on the chair, frowning and looking displeased. Seeing that a great disaster might befall Heaven Wasteland Domain, these people left one after another. Although it was irreproachable to seek benefits and avoid harm, but he despised it. Thinking about it, the old ape sighed softly again. In the current situation, it was already very rare that they didn't take advantage of the situation to take advantage of it. Senior, you should also go back. Su Zimo came in front of the old ape and cupped his hands slightly. The old ape was taken aback for a moment. This brother of Yuan Huang is indeed a kind and loyal person. He didn't want to implicate others, so he took the initiative to persuade me to leave. The old ape quickly understood Su Zimo's intention and thought to himself, something's wrong, something's going to happen. Immortal King Zixian was secretly shocked and said to Yunju through divine sense, I told you not to come to Heaven Wasteland Domain. Look, these important people are leaving. I was right, this Su Zimo can't hold up a domain after all. Monarch North Koan casually tore open the void, wanting to leave this place. But when his fingertip tore open a crack in the void, he suddenly felt a huge resistance. They couldn't enter the void at all. Monarch North Koan's heart sank. The surrounding void has been sealed, Monarch South Rock shouted. The two of them were still a step too late. The expressions of the Frost Dragon Emperor and the others changed when they heard this. If only one or two Emperor experts sealed the void, even a peak Emperor wouldn't be able to stop an expert of Monarch North Koan's level from leaving. In other words, the one who sealed the void was definitely a peak Emperor expert, and there was more than one of them. More importantly, there was a hidden meaning behind the act of sealing the void. Only with absolute confidence would one seal the void in advance. Sealing the void meant that there was only one possibility, to kill all of them. What was even more frightening was that the Emperor experts in the hall didn't notice at all that the surrounding void had been sealed. Who was the one who did it? Heaven Wasteland Domain has just been established. This is such a big matter. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? At this moment, a voice came from outside the hall. The next moment, a series of powerful auras burst forth from the sky above Heaven Wasteland Domain and slowly descended. Outside the hall, golden light spread and illuminated the world as if it was daytime. Suddenly, people and horses neighed as a large number of cultivators and living beings descended on Heaven Wasteland Domain. Everyone scanned with their divine senses, and their expressions changed drastically. The cultivators outside were densely packed and almost covered the sky above Heaven Wasteland Domain. They came from different domains and seemed to be an army of at least 100 million people. It's the light world, the Frost Dragon Emperor whispered. There were so many cultivators outside, and they came from different domains. However, upon closer inspection, one could see that these domains were mainly from the light world. They were either subordinate domains of the light world, or friendly with the light world. Just the imperial monarchs alone numbered over 80. Other than the 15 imperial emperors from the light world, the remaining imperial emperors were all from other worlds. These emperor experts, led by the Lord of the Light World, arrived in front of the Heaven Wasteland Hall in the blink of an eye. This was an unimaginable aura and pressure surging over. It was majestic and suffocating. Before the Lord of the Light World and the others entered the hall, Immortal King Zixian could no longer stand. He sat weakly next to Yunju and muttered, it's over. We're going to be killed by Su Zimo. Let alone an immortal king like him. Even peak immortal emperors like the North Koan monarch and the Frost Dragon Empress felt tremendous pressure. Even a war between super great realms could not compare to such a grand scale of battle. The few of them did not bring anyone with them. If a conflict really broke out, no matter how strong they were, they would not be able to stop the 80 emperor experts led by the Lord of the Light World. More importantly, the surrounding void was sealed, which was equivalent to cutting off all connections with the outside world. They could not even ask for reinforcements. Chapter 3152. The Lord of Light led more than 80 emperor experts into the Heaven Wasteland Palace, causing the ground to shake. Fellow Taoist Tianyao, what are you here for? Emperor Beikuan cupped his hands and asked. To congratulate Realm Lord Su, of course. The Lord of Light turned his gaze to Su Zimo, saying faintly, I came uninvited. Realm Lord Su won't blame me, right? This is the Lord of Light. The voice of the Ice Dragon Emperor suddenly sounded in Su Zimo's mind, reminding him, this group of people has bad intentions, be careful. Before Su Zimo could speak, the old ape suddenly sneered. Do you need so many people to come to congratulate? The more the merrier. The Lord of Light smiled. I mentioned to the realm lords of these domains that the Heaven Wasteland domain has just been established, and the realm lord is courageous and daring, not only daring to take in the dark sinful spirit, but also entangled with the Rakshasa sinful spirit. The realm lords of these domains also want to come and take a look. These words were already filled with hidden killing intent. An emperor raised his voice. This must be Realm Lord Su. Why do you look so unwelcoming when you see us coming to congratulate? The person who spoke was the Moon Illumination Realm Lord. In the entire palace, until now, the only person who could still maintain a calm expression was Su Zimo. When he heard that, Su Zimo smiled. Of course you're welcome. I've said that everyone is a guest. Please take a seat. Ha 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 ha. The celestial emperors laughed when they heard this. In such a situation, who would dare not welcome them? This Su Zimo was also smart. Sit. The Lord of Light waved his hand, indicating the emperors to take a seat in the palace. What was strange was that, including the Lord of Light, more than 80 emperor experts did not sit in the upper seats, but dozens of upper seats were empty. The Heaven Wasteland domain has just been established for 100 years, and it has such a scene. It is really surprising. The Lord of Light looked at Su Zimo, smiled and praised. Realm Lord Su is really good. You flatter me. Su Zimo replied indifferently. It's a pity. The Radiance Lord's tone changed. He retracted his smile and slowly said, such a beautiful scene is about to disappear. Monarch North Kuan and the others shuddered upon hearing this. This sentence had already revealed the intentions of the Radiant Lord and the others. I've also heard about this matter. There should be some misunderstanding. Emperor Nanpeng tried to smooth things over. Su Zimo is from the lower world after all. He might not know much about evil fiends and sinful spirits. Just get him to hand over the dark sinful spirit, the Rakshasa sinful spirit. As a matter of fact, Monarch Nanpeng was actually reminding Su Zimo to hand the person over as soon as possible. 100 years. The Radiant World Lord sighed and said, it's been 100 years, and he still hasn't handed over the dark sinful spirit. It's already too late. Monarch Bei Kuan and the others looked at each other in silence. Given the attitude of the Radiance Realm Lord, it was clear that he wouldn't leave the matter at that. Even if they appeared, it would be useless. The Heaven Wasteland domain would not be able to escape this calamity. 100 years. Indeed, there should be an explanation for this matter. Su Zimo said. However, this matter has nothing to do with the Radiant World Lords. Let them leave first. Monarch North Kuan and the others had complicated expressions on their faces. In all fairness, they quite liked Su Zimo. This young man knew that he was going to die, but he didn't want to implicate them. No one is allowed to leave without a conclusion to today's matter. The Radiant World Lord sneered and said in a decisive tone. Monarch North Kuan frowned, and his expression turned cold. He said in a deep voice, what? Daoist Tian Yao, do you still want us to stay? The old ape said coldly, if we join forces and fight to the death, even if we can't win, how many of the 80 monarchs you brought with you can survive? The old ape's words were extremely powerful. If the Radiant World Lord wanted to attack them, he would have to pay a heavy price. Most of the 80 monarchs weren't from the Radiant World. These monarchs weren't united. The old ape wanted to make these monarchs hesitate and not act rashly. However, after he said this, the group of monarchs only chuckled a few times with mocking expressions, as if they weren't worried at all and didn't care. The Frost Dragon Emperor frowned slightly and pondered. The Radiant World Lord and the other 80 monarchs were a powerful force that couldn't be ignored. However, these people shouldn't be able to silently seal the void outside Heaven Wasteland domain. In other words, there was another expert who sealed the void. The Frost Dragon Emperor glanced at the empty main seat, and the many upper seats in the Heaven Wasteland Palace. She seemed to have thought of something, and her heart suddenly sank. Could it be? At this moment, waves of powerful aura suddenly surged from outside, even suppressing the dozens of monarchs in the palace. In the blink of an eye, dozens of figures appeared at the entrance of the Heaven Wasteland Palace. The leader wore a long green robe and was expressionless. He was the first to step into the palace. When this green-robed man stepped into the palace, a heart-palpitating aura spread out and shrouded the heads of everyone in the palace. The many monarchs in the palace could feel a fear that came from the depths of their bloodlines. This was bloodline suppression. Even Emperor North Kuan, Emperor South Rock, and the Frost Dragon Emperor, who had powerful bloodlines like the Kuan clan, the Rock clan, and the dragons couldn't avoid it. The hall instantly became deathly silent. Who wants to leave? The green-robed man looked around, and his gaze fell on Emperor North Kuan and the others. He said indifferently, "I can send him on his way first." Hiss! With just one sentence, Emperor North Kuan and the others felt their hair stand on end, and their scalps tingle. It was as if they dared to say a word, this green-robed man would attack and directly send them to the netherworld. Even the prideful elder ape was shocked. When he saw this person, his eyes burst with a bloody light. He looked agitated and clenched his fists tightly, trying hard to control himself. He recognized this green-robed man. Back then, this was the person who led the celestial tribute world and killed half of the blood ape world. And this person wasn't from the celestial tribute world, but from the heavenly court. Furthermore, the elder ape could clearly sense that this green-robed man was stronger than before. Su Zimo swept his gaze across, and his gaze landed on the badges at the waists of the imperial lords. The word Song was written on them. One of the 9 heavens, Song Heavens. Behind the green-robed man, Su Zimo caught sight of another familiar face. Emperor Green Flame. However, the Emperor Green Flame did not recognize him. The green-robed man and the other 50 heavenly court's imperial lords entered the palace and headed forward. The World Lord of Light and the others stood up one after another and bowed respectfully. Unable to withstand the pressure, Emperor North Kuan and the others bowed and retreated. The green-robed man's gaze shifted to the elder ape. Initially, the elder ape was seated on his chair the entire time. At that moment, he stood up slowly and grit his teeth, raising his head without bowing. "You're still the same." The green-robed man was indifferent and walked past the elder ape, saying casually, "I should have killed all of you monkeys back then." The elder ape's body trembled slightly, and he did not say anything. Under everyone's gazes, the green-robed man naturally arrived at the main seat in the middle of the palace and sat down, as though he was the owner of this place. The other imperial lords of the heavenly courts sat down as well. It was only at this moment that Emperor North Kuan and the others realized that the empty seats were reserved for them. Chapter 3153. This Su Zimo, just how big of a figure did he offend? Immortal King Zixian wailed in his heart. He had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, but had never seen more than 5 emperor experts. He had never seen such a scene, where more than 100 emperor experts appeared all of a sudden. Moreover, the 50 that appeared later obviously had a greater background. Even a figure like the Lord of the Light Sector had to bow and salute in front of this group of people. In fact, this was indeed the case. When the green-robed man appeared and asked a question, everyone in the main hall was silent like cicadas in winter. The imposing manner of Emperor Kuan of North Kuan and the Frost Dragon Emperor were completely suppressed. Although they had never seen the green-robed man before, they had already guessed the origin of this group of emperor experts. Emperor Kuan of North Kuan and Emperor Nanpeng exchanged a glance, secretly shaking their heads. Heaven Wasteland domain was finished. They thought that the worst possibility was that the Celestial Tribute domain and the Light Sector would find trouble with Heaven Wasteland domain. Unexpectedly, the actual situation was more serious than they had imagined. The Colossus behind the Celestial Tribute domain had directly sent people over. Moreover, to deal with the small Heaven Wasteland domain, they had directly sent out 50 Emperor experts. It was impossible to save Heaven Wasteland domain. Now they only had one thought, and that was to escape unscathed as much as possible. After the green-robed man came to the main seat in the main hall of Heaven Wasteland Domain and sat down, he saw that the Lord of the Light Sector and the others were still standing and bowing. He smiled and said, "Everyone sit down, no need to be reserved." "Thank you, Lord." After the Lord of the Light Sector and the others thanked him, they carefully sat down. At this time Su Zimo, who was standing in the middle of the main hall, became unusually conspicuous. Emperor Kuan of North Kuan, the Frost Dragon Emperor, and the others could not help but glance at Su Zimo, slightly taken aback. In such a situation, the Heaven Wasteland Domain Lord looked incomparably calm, and his expression was as usual, without panic, surprise, or fear. Even they, as bystanders, were under tremendous pressure and uneasy. No one could imagine what kind of pressure Su Zimo, who was in the center of the storm, was under. Under such circumstances, no matter if Su Zimo was terrified, trembling, or even weeping and begging for mercy, they would not be surprised, and they could understand. The only thing they didn't expect was that Su Zimo would be like this. It was too peaceful. It was so calm that it was incomprehensible. However, the green-robed man did not look at Su Zimo at all. To him, the so-called Heaven Wasteland Domain Lord, a peerless immortal king, was not worthy of his attention. Dong dong. The green-robed man stretched out his finger and tapped the table lightly, causing everyone's hearts to tremble, and they immediately became nervous. "Let me introduce myself," the azure-robed man said. "I'm from the Heavenly Court. I'm sure some of you have some understanding of the Heavenly Court. To put it simply, the Heaven Realm is acting on the orders of the Heavenly Court." Monarch North Kuan, Frost Dragon Empress, and the others had already guessed who these people were, so they weren't surprised. It was the first time the Master of the Flower Realm and Immortal Emperor Zixien had heard about it. Even the Reverence World had to obey the orders of the Heavenly Court. The azure-robed man continued, "I'm from the Heaven Realm of the Heavenly Court, and I'm the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador." There was silence in the main hall. "Oh, you probably haven't heard of the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador," the azure-robed man continued. "To put it simply, only the strongest person under the Heaven Realm, other than the Heaven Realm Emperor, is qualified to be an Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador. The strongest person under the Heaven Realm Emperor," the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador said. "Every time before the demons wreak havoc, the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors will head to the 3,000 domains to patrol and have a chat with the current realm lords." "Haha, everyone, don't be nervous and don't be afraid." The Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador looked at Monarch North Kuan, Monarch South Rock, and the others and chuckled. "Since we've met here, it saves me the trouble of visiting. I'll also ask you a question." The hearts of Monarch North Kuan and the others trembled. The Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador spoke softly and with a gentle attitude, but Monarch North Kuan, Monarch South Rock, and the others knew that if they answered incorrectly, the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador would turn hostile and kill them. The Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador's tone gradually lowered as he said slowly, "With the demons wreaking havoc in the world, do the Kuan Peng World, Dragon World, Blood Ape World, and Flower World plan to side with the demons and rebel against their superiors? Or do you plan to be ordered by the Heavenly Court to slay the demons and quell the chaos?" The expressions of Monarch North Kuan, Flower World, and the others changed slightly. It was obvious that he wanted them to declare their stance. Monarch North Kuan said, "The Kuan Peng World will definitely stand on the Heavenly Court's side." The Flower World's Lord also quickly said, "It's our duty to slay the demons." "Very good, very obedient." The Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador clapped and smiled. His gaze turned to the Elder Ape and Frost Dragon Empress. The Elder Ape clenched his fists and remained silent. The Frost Dragon Empress fell silent for a moment before forcing a smile. Reporting to the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador, "The Dragon World has just experienced a calamity. Our clansmen have suffered heavy casualties, and less than a tenth of them are still alive. We are truly unable to participate in the war against the demons. At my age, I still have some strength and can be ordered by the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador. The Frost Dragon Empress' words were in fact prepared to sacrifice herself to protect the bloodline of the dragons and not let the dragons be involved in the calamity of the world. Oh, the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador smiled and said, "In that case, the dragons will be on the side of the demons." No. The Frost Dragon Empress' expression changed and she hurriedly explained, "The dragons are just unable to participate in the war and will not help the demons. Since they are unable to participate in the war, then there is no need for the dragons to exist." Before the Frost Dragon Empress finished, the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador interrupted her and said faintly, "If they are not being ordered by the Heavenly Court, then they are helping the demons. The dragons do not want to help either side and only care about themselves. How can there be such an easy thing?" The Frost Dragon Empress' face turned pale. Su Zimo stood in the main hall and remained silent. He was observing and wanted to know the true purpose of this group of people. This group of people from the Heavenly Court should not have mobilized so many people just for the Heaven Wasteland domain. Therefore, he was not in a hurry to transfer Wu Dao's original body over, and was also guarding against the Great Wasteland domain. However, when he heard this, he was sure of one thing. The War of the Heavens was initiated by the demons, but the party that forced the 3,000 domains to express their stance and involved the beings of the 3,000 domains in this war was indeed the Heavenly Court. The Demon Lord had looked for him. The evil Emperor had also looked for Daiyu and wanted to ask her for help. Even if Daiyu refused, the evil Emperor did not make things difficult for her. Neither the Demon Lord nor the evil Emperor forced them, and instead allowed them to make their own choice. But in front of the Heavenly Court, the 3,000 domains had no choice. Either they were ordered by the Heavenly Court to charge at the forefront and fight against the demons, or they died. The Heavenly Court is really impressive. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the middle of the main hall, and was extremely ear-piercing. Under the pressure of the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador, all the emperors were trembling in fear, who dared to speak carelessly. And with sarcasm, this person was hopeless. Everyone looked at Su Zimo in the middle of the main hall, as if they were looking at a dead man. Emperor Kuan and the others secretly shook their heads, feeling a trace of pity in their hearts. "Ha!" Emperor Greenflame suddenly sneered. "We forgot about the Heaven Wasteland Domain Lord. He is not happy." Chapter 3154. Su Zimo ignored Emperor Azure Flame. Instead, he looked at the Emissary Inspector Heavens sitting on the main seat and asked calmly, "Why did the Heavenly Court seal the middle worlds and block the ascension path of the myriad races?" The Emissary Inspector Heavens raised his brows slightly. This matter was originally an extremely secretive matter. Even among the imperial emperors of the various worlds, not many people knew about it. The Celestial Tribute World did not allow the middle worlds to discuss it, nor did they allow anyone to mention it. When Emperor North Kuan, Emperor South Rock, Frost Dragon Emperor, and the others heard this, their expressions changed. They were clearly moved. As realm lords and super great worlds that had a legacy of several epochs, they naturally had extremely secretive legacies. Although they did not know the exact situation, they had a rough guess. "You actually know about this?" The Emissary Inspector Heaven smiled. Su Zimo continued, "I also know that the 9 heavens as the courts have sealed a large amount of Heaven-Earth Yuan Qi from the middle worlds within the heavenly courts. This caused the Heaven-Earth Yuan Qi in the middle worlds to be relatively thin, making the cultivation of the myriad races much more difficult." Ha ha ha. The Emissary Inspector Heavens laughed and asked, "So what if you know?" Su Zimo did not answer and only continued asking, "What is the Heavenly Court's goal?" "Are you questioning me?" The Emissary Inspector Heavens looked at Su Zimo with eyes full of sarcasm and mockery. He laughed and said, "You middle world beings are just a bunch of ants, livestock that we rear. As livestock, you have to have the awareness of livestock. If there comes a day when you feel indignant and want to jump out of your cage, only slaughter awaits you." Since he was prepared to kill them all, the Emissary Inspector Heavens did not intend to hide anything. The Emissary Inspector Heavens looked down at Emperor North Kuan, Light World Lord, and the others and said gently, The heaven-earth yuan qi in the middle worlds is also a reward from the heavenly courts. You have to know how to be content and grateful. The emperors of the middle worlds were insulted by the emissary Inspector Heavens. Emperor North Kuan, Emperor South Rock, and the others were expressionless and did not dare to refute. They could only suppress the anger in their hearts. The Light World Lord hurriedly got up, knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Thunder and rain do are all heavenly grace. The Light World will definitely remember it. If the heavenly courts has any orders, the Protoss of the Light World will die. Let alone Emperor Baikuan." Everyone from the Heaven Wasteland domain felt a burst of disgust. Even some emperors from the Light domain bowed their heads slightly, a look of shame flashing across their eyes. Emperor North Kuan and others were under pressure. As for the Radiant World Lord's side, he was completely a servile and fawning servant. Heavens! Lord Kuan. Heavenly Court said. Heavens look he. World Emperor Heavens. Inspector Heavens said world. Said Heavenly Court's Lord, Earth Yuan think. The Heavenly Inspector Heavenly Ambassador looked around and said, Heaven Wasteland domain is indeed well built, and is not inferior to the various immortal palaces of the Heavenly Court. But you bunch of ants live in a place similar to the Heavenly Court. You have overstepped your boundaries and committed a heinous crime. You are all livestock. How can you live and cultivate in such an environment? Only Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador's voice resounded in the hall. No one dared to interrupt. The atmosphere was extremely stifling. Everyone knew that there would be a massacre today. But no one knew when this massacre would come. Empyrean Lord North Kuan and company even vaguely hoped that the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador would continue speaking. That way, the massacre might come a little later. It's about time. At that moment, the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador suddenly said. Then he looked at the center of the hall and Su Zimo, who had a calm expression, and said with a faint smile, "Let me guess. You are still so calm even now. You must be expecting someone from the Sword Realm to come and save you, right? It's a pity that the surrounding void has been sealed. Your message won't be able to spread. But it doesn't matter. I'll show you the situation of the Sword Realm." As soon as he finished speaking, the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador took out a transparent water ball and suddenly threw it out of the hall. It shattered in the sky above the Heaven Wasteland domain and turned into a huge water screen. Through the water screen, everyone saw 9 sword-shaped continents and a huge palace complex in the middle of the 9 continents. Through this water screen, everyone was able to see everything in the sword world clearly. And at this moment, the void around the 9 great sword edges of the sword realm was also sealed. There were many cultivators standing there, far more than the army outside the Heaven Wasteland domain. They surrounded the sword realm so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. Empyrean Lord North Kuan, Ice Dragon Emperor, and the others were greatly shocked. They saw that in the various camps around the sword realm, there were more than 10 Empyrean Lords from the Sky Vision domain, Stone domain, and Golden Crow domain. There were also people from the Blood domain, but there were not many of them. But these Empyrean Lords were not enough to make Empyrean Lord North Kuan's expression change. In addition to the Empyrean Lords from these super domains, the experts from the Sky Tribute domain were also present, including the 6 Sky Tribute domain Lords. There were more than 100 Empyrean Lords leading the Sky Tribute army. In front of these Empyrean Lords stood 3 major camps. The token on their waists was made of the same material as the token of the Firmament Inspector, Heavenly Ambassador in the hall. However, the words on the tokens of the 3 major camps were Yen Haoshuan. In each of the 3 major camps, there were 50 Empyrean Lords. In addition to the 3 super domains of the Sky Tribute domain, the number of Empyrean Lords around the Sword Realm was close to 300. The Sword Realm was finished. This was the only thought left in the minds of Empyrean Lord North Kuan, Ice Dragon Emperor, and the others. 300 Empyrean Lords were enough to sweep through all the domains of the Middle World. Moreover, they were led by the Empyrean Lords of the Sky Court. In the Sword Realm, the Iron Crown Elder and the other Sword Realm cultivators also appeared. Through the water screen, Everyone could clearly see the Iron Crown Elder's pale face, and the fear in the eyes of the sword cultivators. Everyone could even see the beads of sweat on the sword cultivators' foreheads. The army of nearly 300 Empyrean lords was like a torrential flood that could devour everything and destroy all life. The sword realm appeared so insignificant and helpless in front of this shocking torrent. In the end, the old man with the iron crown still stood out and asked in a loud voice, "What is the meaning of all of you coming to the sword world?" The sword realm colluded with evil fiends and sinful spirits. "We will kill them without mercy," White Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador said coldly. The Iron Crown Elder said in a deep voice, "Do you have any evidence?" "My words are the evidence," White Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador said expressionlessly. In the Heaven Wilderness Grand Hall, Empyrean Lord North Kuan and the others could already see the Heavenly Court's intentions. They could not help but sigh. The Heavenly Court's Sky Tribute Domain had joined forces with many super great domains. With such a lineup, it was obvious that they had no intention of letting the Sword Realm live. No matter how the Sword Realm explained, it was useless. With the fiend-slaying war at hand, the Heavenly Courts clearly wanted to establish their dominance. They wanted to use the blood of the Sword Realm to warn the thousands of living beings in the 3,000 domains of what would happen if they stood on the wrong side. Even if it was not the Sword Realm, there would be other realms. In short, the Heavenly Courts wanted to use the blood of a super great domain to establish their dominance. Chapter 3155. In the main hall, people like Lin Zhan and Feng Cantillon were not worried about Su Zimo at first. After all, they knew that Wu Dao's true body was behind Su Zimo. The Heavenly Court sealed off the surrounding void, preventing information from being transmitted. But it was impossible to seal off the connection between Su Zimo's two true bodies. With a thought, Wu Dao's true body could descend here at any time. But seeing this scene, the people of Heaven Wasteland Domain looked solemn and looked at Su Zimo with worry. No matter how strong Araki Takashi was, he could not split himself and could only save one side at most. If Araki Takashi descended on Heaven Wasteland Domain, they could only watch as Sword Realm was destroyed. With nearly 300 emperors leading an army of hundreds of millions, attacking with all their might, Sword Realm would not even last for half an hour. If Araki Takashi went to Sword Realm, Heaven Wasteland Domain would also be destroyed in an instant. This was destined to be a difficult choice. Seeing this scene, Su Zimo only narrowed his eyes slightly and remained calm. He had been waiting for the Heavenly Court to reveal their trump card, which was why Wu Dao's true body did not appear. Now the Heavenly Court placed a large number of troops in Sword Realm, but in the 9 heavens, there were still 5 days that had not appeared. Su Zimo wanted to confirm the movements of the remaining 5 days. Firmament Yin Tian White Tian Xian Tian. Su Zimo said, "Since there are 9 days, why are there only 4 days?" Haha, the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador chuckled. To deal with Sword Realm and Heaven Wasteland Domain, let alone 4 days, just 1 day is enough. Emperor Qin Yen curled his lips. They will arrive in 5 days, but an ant like you won't have the chance to see it. Oh, Su Zimo nodded. The Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador stood up, stretched out his arms, looked at Su Zimo and the people of Heaven Wasteland Domain, and said with a smile, "Everyone is lucky to witness this killing feast with us. No need to thank me, because I will soon send you on your way and reunite with Sword Realm." The voice of the Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador spread to every corner of Heaven Wasteland Domain. The hundreds of millions of troops led by the Light World became unusually excited, and their eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty light. The people of Heaven Wasteland Domain looked at the water curtain above their heads and realized that a great disaster was about to befall Heaven Wasteland Domain. They were all terrified and uneasy. The Firmament Inspector Heavenly Ambassador's voice continued, "This battle will be known throughout the 3,000 domains. I will let you animals understand what the will of Heavenly Court means. If you go against the will of the heavens, the Sword World will be your end. Great Domain, Butterfly Valley." The Heavenly Courts awakened, opened his eyes at the same time. Heavenly Court. God, you detected it, Heavenly Court ambassador asked. Yes, Heavenly Court's people heavenses. Wu Dao said. There are close to 300 emperors in the sword domain, led by 3 divine emissaries, 2 young masters of the celestial court, and the celestial tribute domain. There are more than 100 emperors in the heaven wasteland domain, led by the divine emissaries of the firmament and Emperor Qing Yan. Dai stood up and said indifferently, You go to the sword realm, leave heaven wasteland domain to me. For 100 years, Dai had yet to take that step. During this period of time, Dai did not cultivate in seclusion, nor did she stay with Wu Dao's original body. Instead, they were like mortals working at sunrise and resting at sunrise. Strolling among the flowers, washing their feet by the stream, meditating in the mountains, drinking alone under the moon. Unknowingly, Daiyu's injuries had already healed. Wu Dao's main body would occasionally glance at Daiyu from afar. There was no change in Daiyu's realm. However, Wu Dao's main body could sense that Daiyu's body was constantly changing. This change was indescribable, and even Wu Dao's main body could not explain it or see through it. Daiyu seemed to have completely integrated into this world and nature in 100 years, and her body was tainted by the mortal world. However, she also seemed to be traveling outside of heaven and earth, overlooking all living beings. She had already reached a transcendent state of extreme emptiness, tranquility. Wu Dao's main body could sense that Daiyu was much stronger than she was 100 years ago. However, he could not say for sure what level her battle strength had reached. Heaven Wasteland Domain has an inspector, Heavenly Ambassador, Emperor Qing Yan, and more than 100 Emperor experts. Wu Dao's main body was slightly hesitant, still somewhat worried about Daiyu. Daiyu smiled and said, I don't have much confidence against 3 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors, but against 1, it's not a big problem. With the addition of more than 100 Emperor experts, it's hard to say who will win, but at least they won't be able to hurt me. At this point, Daiyu paused slightly and looked at Wu Dao's main body, a trace of seriousness flashing in her beautiful eyes. I'm worried about your side. Wu Dao's main body was speechless. He could tell that Daiyu was not worried about the 3 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors and the nearly 300 Emperor experts. She was worried that if Wu Dao's main body saved the sword world, he would definitely not hold back. Once he started a massacre, it was very likely to alarm the experts of the other 5 heavens, and even the Emperor of the Heavenly Court. Back then, the Demon Lord had also warned Wu Dao's main body. In the previous battle of the Great Wilderness, the Emperor of the Heavenly Court did not appear. This time, if there was a conflict with the Heavenly Court, the Emperor would most likely intervene. To Wu Dao's main body, there was no need to rush to start the War of the Heavens in this life. He was currently at the initial Emperor realm, and if he had enough time, he could cultivate to the Great Emperor realm, or even the Great Emperor realm, and his chances of winning the War of the Heavens would be greater. However, if today's battle caused the Emperor of the Heavenly Court to intervene, it would be a huge crisis for Wu Dao's main body. It might even cause the War of the Heavens to be brought forward. More importantly, in this era, no emperor had been born in the middle world. If the Emperor of the Heavenly Court intervened, no one in the middle world could help Wu Dao's main body. Daiyu had not become a great emperor, and could not help. This time, if Wu Dao's main body intervened, it was very likely to have a far-reaching impact, and no one could guess how the situation would develop in the end. If the Emperor of the Heavenly Court intervenes, we can only fight. Wu Dao's main body's eyes were deep, and his expression was fearless. The Sword World and Heaven Wasteland Domain could not save him. Even if the War of the Heavens was brought forward, it was not a big deal. After all, he still had one last trump card. I'll send you to Heaven Wasteland Domain first. Wu Dao's main body said. Although Wu Dao's main body had not become a great emperor, he could use the 10 gates of hell to descend to any place in the 3,000 domains. However, the other imperial emperors were unable to do so. You look down on me. Who needs you to send me? Daiyu rolled her eyes at Wu Dao's main body. Wu Dao's main body's eyes lit up. It seemed that in the past 100 years, Dai Yu's improvement had exceeded his imagination. The two separated here, and their figures flickered, disappearing from the great wasteland domain. At the same time, in the heaven domain, the 9 heavens immortal emperor, lord of 6 Brahma heavens, and the world devastator demon emperor seemed to have sensed something, and woke up at the same time, looking in the direction of the sword world and heaven wasteland domain, their faces revealing an excited and strange smile. Kill. The more we kill, the better. The 3 corpses activated their consciousness, and at the same time operated the burying heaven scripture. The entire heaven domain seemed to have turned into a huge tomb, lifeless. Even the divine tree of the builder would seem to have sensed something at this moment. The light on its body dimmed. Its life force was fading, and some of its leaves gradually turned yellow and withered. Chapter 3156. Sword World. The Old Man with the Iron Crown, the Fat and Thin Sword Emperors, and more than a dozen Sword World Emperors were filled with despair. In the face of such a battle array, no realm could resist. Not to mention 1 Sword World. Even 10 Sword Worlds wouldn't be able to escape this calamity. However, the Sword Emperors didn't beg for mercy or explain. They could see that the Heavenly Court, Sky Tribute World, and a few other super worlds were here to destroy Sword World. It didn't matter if they explained or begged for mercy. Since they were going to die anyway, they might as well fight to their heart's content. This was the Tao of sword cultivators. They would rather break than submit and advance courageously. However, even the Sword Emperors weren't sure how long they could hold on. Perhaps a few dozen breaths, or half an incense stick's time. After that, Sword World would become the history of the Middle World. Like the Dark World, it would gradually disappear from everyone's memories as time passed. Iron Crown. You sword cultivators love to be chivalrous and fight for justice. Have you ever thought that this day would come? World Lord Sky Eyes sneered. Although World Lord Sky Eyes didn't say it clearly, the old man with the iron crown could roughly guess what was going on. Back then, when the Heaven's Eye World destroyed the 7-star Sword World and massacred millions of lives, they were encountered by a few Sword World Peak Masters. They rescued some of the sword cultivators from the 7-star Sword World and became enemies with the Heaven's Eye World because of this. Later on, in the evil demon battlefield, Lin Xuanjin and the others suffered the revenge of the Sky Eyes race and almost died. It was Su Zimo who helped Sword World vent their anger. Later on, when the evil demon battlefield opened for the second time, Su Zimo was besieged by more than 20 supreme true spirits. Among them was the number 1 true spirit Xia Yin. However, these supreme true spirits were all suppressed by Su Zimo. Thinking of this, the old man with the iron crown rejoiced. Fortunately, Su Zimo left in advance and didn't suffer this calamity. In the future, if Su Zimo had a chance to become a great emperor, he might be able to continue Sword World's inheritance, since he knew the Daoyuo sword canon. Do you think that Su Zimo will be able to escape this calamity? The heavenly eye on World Lord Sky Eye's forehead opened slightly. It was as though he could see through the thoughts that flashed past the old man's mind. He suddenly laughed and asked. The old man's heart sank. Sword light flashed in his eyes as he asked. What do you mean? Ha 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 ha. The Sky Vision Realm Lord, Golden Crow Realm Lord, Stone Realm Lord, and the others laughed out loud. Today, I'll let you give up on that thought, and let you die with a clear understanding. At this moment, Heaven Wasteland Domain is also facing the same situation. Including Su Zimo, no one will be able to escape. You. The old man with the iron crown glared angrily, and a sharp ear-piercing sword hum burst out from his body. When the fat and thin sword emperors heard this, they closed their eyes and sighed. This was truly a ruthless extermination. The Stone Domain Lord laughed heartily. Tai Guan, the Sword Domain should thank us. After this battle, you and Heaven Wasteland Domain can reunite in the underworld. Below, you can establish another Heaven Wasteland Domain, a Sword Domain, and bring the Sword Path to greater heights. Ha 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 ha. Bursts of laughter came from the Heavenly Court. Right at this moment, a calm voice that carried a trace of coldness suddenly resounded from the crowd of the Sword World. Seniors, fellow disciples of the Sword Domain, don't worry. The sword domain will not die. This voice in the surrounding laughter seemed extremely different, but it was powerful and unusually firm. Not only the people of the sword domain, but even the emperors of the heavenly court looked in the direction of the voice. The person who spoke had not even stepped into the grotto heaven, and was standing side by side with the 8 peak masters. It was a woman with a long sword on her back. She is Kitsune, the current peak master of the 9th sword peak of the sword domain. In the crowd, someone recognized the identity of the woman and said. Immediately, there was a burst of laughter. In this situation, not to mention the peak master of the sword peak, even the 3 domain lords of the sword domain would be reduced to ants under the absolute power of the heavenly court. Kitsune's sudden words sounded like a joke to everyone. The old man with the iron crown and the others looked at Kitsune. Although they did not have much hope in their hearts, they could not help but ask, "Baiming, what you said just now?" Kitsune said in a firm tone, "Master will not watch the sword domain be destroyed. He will definitely come to save us." Hearing this, the sword emperors all looked gloomy and shook their heads. The old man with the iron crown also looked bitter, sighing softly, "Zimo he." Sigh. Su Zimo could not even protect himself. How could he rush over? Moreover, even if Su Zimo rushed over, what was the use? Ha 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 ha. Kitsune's words once again caused the emperor experts to burst into laughter. Even the 3 inspector heavenly court, looking at the cold-looking woman, could not help but chuckle with a mocking expression. The same laughter also sounded in the Heaven Wasteland Palace. "Hey, Heaven Wasteland Domain Master. Your female disciple hopes that you can rush over to save her. Quickly go." He wants to go, but by the time he rushes over, it will probably be a year later, and the sword domain will have already been destroyed. This female cultivator probably does not know that her master has already been scared stiff, and does not dare to move, ha 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 ha. Hearing the laughter around, Su Zimo also laughed. However, not many people knew what he was laughing about. He only raised his head and looked through the dome of the palace, looking at the huge water screen and laughing. Everyone's eyes were also looking at the water screen. Everyone knew that the killing feast was about to begin. But under everyone's gaze, the void on the side of the sword domain and the water screen suddenly split open, and a figure stepped out. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands suddenly strangling everyone's throat. In an instant, the laughter in the sword domain and Heaven Wasteland domain came to an abrupt end, because in front of this figure, not many people could still laugh. Purple robe, black hair, silver mask. Araki Takashi Emperor. It's him, Araki Takashi Emperor. When Emperor Qing Yen saw the person through the water screen, his face changed dramatically, as if he had awakened some terrifying memory. He subconsciously grabbed the arm of the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador and exclaimed. The Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador frowned slightly as he looked at the figure above the sword domain through the water screen. This Araki Takashi Emperor was indeed very strong, unfathomable. Even though they were separated by millions of miles, just through the water screen, the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador could still feel the powerful aura of Araki Takashi Emperor, and the tremendous pressure it brought him. It was not hard to imagine that the group of people around the sword domain would feel even more strongly if they were facing Araki Takashi Emperor. However, the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Ambassador was somewhat puzzled. They had split into 2 groups, deliberately concealing their aura and not showing off, because they were worried that they would attract the attention of Araki Takashi Emperor, which would lead to other changes. A great battle had not broken out, and there were not too many power fluctuations. Normally speaking, Araki Takashi Emperor should not have been able to detect it. After all, no matter how strong Araki Takashi Emperor's divine sense was, and could cover 3,000 domains with a thought, it was impossible for him to watch every corner of the 3,000 domains all the time. When the 2 sides attacked at the same time, and a great battle broke out, under the suppression of absolute strength, the battle would be resolved in a short time. By the time Araki Takashi Emperor sensed it, it was already too late. But unexpectedly, before the 2 sides had attacked, he had already been alerted. End of chapter. Chapter 3157. Sword Realm. Elder Taiguan and the other Sword Realm Imperial Lords were stunned when they saw this figure. But soon, everyone recognized the origin of this figure. Great Desolate World's Imperial Lord Araki Takashi. Imperial Lord Araki Takashi, who had once defeated more than 100 Imperial Lords of the Celestial Tribute World by himself. The Sword Emperors were energized, and a glimmer of hope was reignited. Elder Taiguan and the fat and thin elders looked at each other. They were excited, but also a little complicated. In fact, Elder Taiguan had always wanted to pay a visit to Imperial Lord Araki Takashi. Back then, he had escorted Kitsune to the Kuanpeng world to participate in the wedding of the Kuanpeng world's young master, because he was looking forward to meeting Imperial Lord Araki Takashi in the Kuanpeng world. Unfortunately, when they arrived at the Kuanpeng world, Imperial Lord Araki Takashi had already left and did not meet him. Who would have thought that Imperial Lord Araki Takashi would suddenly descend upon the Sword Realm today? Moreover, after Imperial Lord Araki Takashi descended, the situation in the starry sky seemed to have reversed in an instant. Just one person had completely reversed the momentum of both sides, without making a move. Imperial Lord Araki Takashi stood alone in the starry sky, facing nearly 300 Imperial Lords and countless troops led by the Heavenly Court. He was not at a disadvantage at all. Not only that, after Imperial Lord Araki Takashi appeared, the Imperial Lords of the Celestial Tribute World, Stone World, and Heavenly Eye World were even restless. After all, the Celestial Tribute World had suffered a great loss at the hands of Wu Dao's original body. In the Battle of the Grand Desolate World, dozens of Imperial Lords had died, and their vitality was greatly damaged. As for the Stone World, Heavenly Eye World and Golden Crow World, they had long heard of Araki Takashi's ferocious name and were shocked. A few years ago, Araki Takashi had appeared and even managed to calm the Battle of Dragons and Phoenixes, and the Battle of Kuanpeng World. The leader of the Witch Race, and the leader of the Poison World, had died one after another. With the destruction of the Sorcerer World, the Poison World, and the Blood World suffered different degrees of damage. In the 3,000 worlds, the name Araki Takashi had become a terrifying taboo. In recent years, there was even a saying in the 3,000 realms that if the Great Emperor did not appear, Araki Takashi would reign supreme. Who would dare to clash with him? It wasn't just the Celestial Tribute World. Even the two young lords of the Celestial Court were shaken to the core. They subconsciously took a step back in fear. The Battle of the Grand Desolate had really scared them. They looked on helplessly as young Master Yin Tian died before their eyes. It was only at that moment that they realized that although their identities were noble, they were no different from those ants in a certain aspect. They only had one life. In other words, in the eyes of Araki Takashi, they were nothing but ants. After young Master Yin Tian died, the three of them were almost killed by Monarch Araki Takashi. Back then, Fiend Lord appeared and stopped Monarch Araki Takashi's attack. However, Monarch Baiyu and company were scared out of their wits. They were only focused on escaping, and did not see what happened behind them. After escaping back to the Celestial Courts, everyone felt a lingering fear. They secretly thanked their lucky stars, and felt a lingering fear. After recuperating for more than 100 years, they thought that they could make a comeback after recovering from their injuries. However, when they saw Monarch Araki Takashi again, the trio once again felt the fear of their lives hanging by a thread. Compared to Monarch Baiyu and company, the three Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors, and the other Empyrean Lords of the Celestial Courts were relatively calm. It was especially so for Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian. He looked at Wu Dao's true body with eyes filled with killing intent that nearly spewed fire. "You are Araki Takashi?" Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian asked coldly. As one of the strongest people in the 9 heavens, Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors did not fear Wu Dao's true body. Wu Dao's true body glanced at the token by Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's waist and recognized him. He said indifferently, "I was the one who killed young Master Yin Tian. Are you here for revenge?" This was an undisguised provocation. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's eyes burned like torches as his body suddenly emitted thousands of fiery beams, burning a massive black hole in the cosmos. He was like a god of war bathed in flames as his aura surged. The remaining dozens of Empyrean lords of Yin Tian also drew their weapons. Their faces were filled with killing intent as they waited for the order to attack at any moment. Araki Takashi. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's eyes were cold as he slowly said, "Today, we are destroying the sword world. It has nothing to do with you. I advise you to return to your great desolate world and stay there obediently. In a few days, we will naturally pay you a visit." Who says that the sword world has nothing to do with me? Wu Dao's true body looked at Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian and retorted, "Who do you think I am?" This question stumped everyone from the celestial courts. The three Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors frowned as they did not understand the meaning of Wu Dao's true body's words. Even the Empyrean lords of the sword world were slightly stunned. Could it be that Empyrean Lord Araki Takashi had some relationship with the sword world? Many sword cultivators subconsciously looked at the three Empyrean lords with the iron crown and the fat and thin Empyrean lords. If Empyrean Lord Araki Takashi had something to do with the sword world, the only people who could possibly know about it were the three of them. At this moment, Empyrean lords with the iron crown and the fat and thin Empyrean lords also looked at each other in confusion. Heaven Wasteland Domain. In the main hall, Lin Zhan, Immortal King Ling Long, Feng Cantian, and the others sighed softly in their hearts when they saw Wu Dao's true body appear in the sword world. Their expressions were complicated. It seemed that Su Zimo had made his choice. If Wu Dao's true body went to the sword world, it meant that everything and everyone in the Heaven Wasteland Domain, including his Qinglian true body, would be buried here. However, there was still no sign of worry on Su Zimo's face. He swept his gaze across the crowd and looked at Empyrean Lord Qing Yan and the other Empyrean lords who were mocking him just now. With a mocking expression, he asked with a faint smile, "Why aren't you laughing? Weren't you laughing happily just now?" When Empyrean Lord Qing Yan saw Araki Takashi just now, his expression changed drastically. How could he still laugh? However, being mocked by this little immortal king in front of him, Empyrean Lord Qing Yan suddenly felt embarrassed. His eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. He said slowly, "Aunt, it seems that you haven't realized your situation yet. I can kill you with a thought. With a command, I can destroy the entire Heaven Wasteland Domain. Not even a chicken or dog will be left alive." Su Zimo gradually stopped smiling and stared at Empyrean Lord Qing Yan. He asked slowly, "Who do you think I am?" The Empyrean lords were stunned for a moment. These words sounded familiar. Empyrean Lord Araki Takashi had just said. Everyone subconsciously raised their heads and glanced at Empyrean Lord Araki Takashi in the water curtain. And at this time, under the gazes of countless people from the two great domains, Empyrean Lord Araki Takashi slowly raised his hand and took off the silver mask on his face. Heaven and earth instantly quieted down. Time and space seemed to be frozen. The many creatures of the two great domains seemed to be fixed in place. Seeing this handsome and familiar face, Empyrean Lord Qing Yan's eyes widened, as if he had seen a ghost. You are. Empyrean Lord Qing Yan suddenly turned his head and pointed at Su Zimo in the main hall, his eyes full of horror and his voice trembling. The next moment, Empyrean Lord Araki Takashi's eyes, which were burning with purple flames, seemed to be able to penetrate the countless void through the water curtain and fell on the face of Empyrean Lord Qing Yan of the Heaven Wasteland Domain. At the same time, in the main hall of the Heaven Wasteland Domain, Su Zimo's eyes also lit up with two balls of purple flames. He took a step forward, and the earth shook and the mountains shook. His imposing manner was astonishing. He shouted, "I am Araki Takashi." As soon as these words came out, it shook the 3,000 domains. End of this chapter. Chapter 3158. Emperor Qing Yan exclaimed in shock. He was so frightened that he jumped up from his seat and stumbled backward, hiding behind the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Emissary. The chair overturned and made a loud noise, causing chaos in the surroundings. It was no wonder that Emperor Qing Yin was so frightened. He was shocked when he saw the true appearance of Emperor Araki Takashi. And then he saw that Su Zimo's eyes were also burning with purple flames. He thought that Emperor Araki Takashi was in the main hall, close to him, and wanted to take his life. Emperor Qing Yin wasn't mistaken. Wu Dao's real body looked over from the sword world, his gaze crossing the endless void, containing a biting cold killing intent. At this moment, the aura of the two real bodies almost merged into one. Not to mention Emperor Qing Yin. Even the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Emissary felt a strong sense of danger at this moment. His hair stood on end, and he subconsciously stood up, waiting with rapt attention. At this moment, the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Emissary had an illusion. Although he was standing on the upper seat, the one looking down at him was Su Zimo in the main hall. If the Heaven Inspector Heavenly Emissary and Emperor Qing Yin were like this, the other emperors were also shocked. They all got up and retreated, distancing themselves. For a moment, a huge empty space was in the middle of the Heaven Wasteland Palace. There was no one within 100 feet of Su Zimo. This scene had a great impact on the Sword World and Heaven Wasteland domain. Some people who knew about Su Zimo's two real bodies, such as Lin Zhan, Immortal King Ling Long, Kitsune and Yunju, were not surprised. But the others were stunned by this scene. Their minds were blank, and they could not recover for a long time. What is this? Lin Lei stood in the sky above the war country, looking at the water curtain in the sky, and then in the direction of the Heaven Wasteland Palace. He was dumbfounded. In the past, Lin Zhan and Immortal King Ling Long had said many things to him. At this moment, he suddenly had an answer. Lin Luo came to Lin Lei's side and said faintly, "Brother, you seemed to look down on Emperor Araki Takashi back then." "No." Lin Luo shuddered and flatly denied. Good fellow, good fellow." Immortal King Zixien subconsciously grabbed Yunju's hand, his arm trembling uncontrollably. He swallowed his saliva and muttered, "Father, has misjudged again?" Long Li's eyes widened. Disbelief appeared on Mullian's face. The old ape was excited. Monarch North Kuan, Monarch South Peng, Frost Dragon Empress, Flower Domain Lord, and the other domain lords had complicated expressions on their faces. At this moment they understood many things. Why did Xiaoyao always want them to maintain contact with the Heaven Wasteland domain and befriend Su Zimo? Why would Emperor Araki Takashi suddenly descend upon the Dragon Realm? It was most likely not only because of Long Ran. Why was Su Zimo still fearless in the face of the current situation? Why all the strange things that had happened to Su Zimo previously could be explained at this moment? Sword Domain. When Wu Dao took off his mask, many sword cultivators were stunned on the spot when they saw his handsome face. In the crowd, there were even people who subconsciously called out Peak Master Su. What the hell? Yin Ting jumped up and down. For a moment, his qi and blood were in chaos, and he could not control the thunder and lightning Dao techniques in his body. Electric light surrounded his body and crackled wildly. He had always regarded Su Zimo as a goal to pursue, even though the gap between the two of them was growing larger and larger. Yun Ting had never given up. He believed that one day, he would catch up to Su Zimo, but he never thought that this would be the outcome. What was this? Even when he lost to Su Zimo and Kitsune, he was not dejected. However, the fact that Wu Dao's true body took off his mask was a huge blow to him. The more Yin Ting thought about it, the more indignant he became. He muttered, "If you want to fight, so be it. Why did you take off your mask for no reason?" The Imperial Lords of Sword Domain were surprised and delighted when they saw the true appearance of Wu Dao's true body. The old man with the iron crown was still in disbelief, and could not help but turn back to look at Kitsune with a questioning expression. Kitsune's expression was cold as she raised her chin slightly and said indifferently, "I've already said that Master will come and save us." Good, good, good. The old man with the iron crown could not help but exclaim repeatedly in excitement. The fat and thin elders were filled with emotions as well. Back then, the old man with the iron crown only valued Su Zimo's potential and wanted to form a good relationship with him. Who would have thought that such a huge surprise would be thrown over? Imperial Lord Araki Takashi, was once the peak master of Sword Domain's 9th Sword Peak. This was enough for Sword Domain to brag about for an era. Of course, the prerequisite was that Sword Domain had to survive this calamity. Even with Imperial Lord Araki Takashi around, it was still unknown if Sword Domain could survive. Even including Sword Domain, there were only more than 10 Imperial Lords on their side. On the other side, the Heavenly Courts, Celestial Tribute World, and a few super great worlds led by nearly 300 Imperial Lord experts. After all, Imperial Lord Araki Takashi was only one person. It was impossible for him to take care of everyone in a battle of this level. What was certain was that regardless of the outcome of this battle, it would be extremely tragic. So what if you're Imperial Lord Araki Takashi? Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's eyes burned, but his tone was abnormally cold. You came at the right time today. It saves us the trouble of finding you. The one we'll kill is you, Araki Takashi. Before he finished his sentence, Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian circulated his blood qi and instantly transformed into his true form, a fiery red vermilion bird with boiling lava dripping from his body. Screech! Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian suddenly shrieked as his body trembled. Thousands of feathers scattered from his body. Every feather was flickering with blazing flames. They were like flaming arrows that circled around him. Together with him, they charged towards the martial Dao original body. Just as Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian charged over, Wu Dao's true body attacked immediately. In a flash, he intercepted Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian. There were no flashy hand seals, incantations, or weapons. He raised his hand and punched. Boom! Simplifying the complex, it was a simple punch that contained Wu Dao's dermic powers and Wu Dao's will. With that punch, the cosmos ahead collapsed instantly as a gigantic black hole appeared. A powerful suction force burst forth from the center of the fist, sucking in all the 108,000 feathers that surrounded Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian. It was a Dao dermic vortex formed by the Dao and dermic powers of Wu Dao's true body. Even Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's body could not be controlled. He had never seen such a terrifying fist. Any divine weapon would not be able to withstand a single blow from this fist. Before the 108,000 feathers could collide with Wu Dao's true body's fist, the flames on them were extinguished. The power that came out of that punch was too terrifying. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian wanted to retreat to avoid it. However, he realized that he was already trapped within. There was no way he could escape from the Dao dermic vortex produced by that punch. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian had just said that he would kill Araki Takashi. Before anyone could react, he shouted, "Quick, help me!" End of chapter. Chapter 3159. Attack! Before Blazing Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador could call for help, Profound Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador could tell that something was amiss. He immediately bellowed and transformed into his black tortoise form. Roar! Accompanied by a tiger's roar, White Sky Inspector Heavenly Ambassador revealed his white tiger form. His body was suffused with billowing killing intent, causing the constellations to fall into chaos as the world turned upside down. With the three Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors attacking, it immediately raised the curtains to a huge battle. Nearly 300 Imperial Emperors also drew their weapons and prepared to besiege Wu Dao's main body. The Sword Emperors of Sword Realm, under the lead of the Iron Crown Old Man and the Fat Thin Old Man, all made their moves to support Wu Dao's main body. The Battle of Kings and the Battle of True Spirits also erupted. Wu Dao's main body knew that in such a situation, only by severely injuring the opponent's strongest expert, as soon as possible could he reduce the casualties of the Sword Realm to the greatest extent. Therefore, if Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian wanted to kill him, he had already targeted the three Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors. If 300 Empyrean Lord experts were to form an encirclement, it would probably take some effort to kill the three Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors. At the instant Wu Dao attacked, he was already prepared to kill Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian immediately. This was also the reason why Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian felt such immense pressure and danger. Roar! Wu Dao's true body didn't wait for the other Imperial Emperors to attack and surround him. Instead, he directly unleashed the sound domain secret technique, Sound of All Spirits. A huge sound wave burst out from his mouth, creating ripples in the starry sky that rapidly spread out. However, no sound could be heard in the crowd. Great Sound Void. The voice of all spirits had already touched upon the level of Tao, reaching the level of a forbidden technique. The 3 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors and the 2 Heavenly Court's young masters were the first to react as their expressions changed drastically. Even if they weren't prepared, they would still suffer quite a bit of damage from the soundwave attack of a taboo technique. Screech! Roar! Roar! The 3 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors and the 2 Heavenly Court's young masters immediately released a sound domain mystic technique of the sacred beast race to resist it. They blocked most of the damage from the voice of myriad spirits, giving the other Empyrean lords a precious moment to react. Most of the Imperial Emperors quickly realized the danger they were in. They either unleashed their sound domain secret techniques to resist it, or activated their Qi blood to support a world. Some of them quickly left the center of the battlefield to avoid the range of the sound wave attack. However, there were also a few Imperial Emperors who reacted slightly slower. The ripples created by the voice of all spirits swept past them. The gazes of these Imperial Emperors turned sluggish, and the life force in their bodies rapidly drained away. They fell backward in the starry sky, no longer breathing. There were no injuries on the bodies of the Imperial Lords. However, their consciousnesses were shattered by the sound wave, and their essence spirits were destroyed. Normally speaking, it was very difficult for Imperial Emperors to die. But because of Wu Dao's real body's intervention, the Emperor battle was elevated to a whole new level, becoming extremely intense. Even god monarchs would perish on the spot if they were careless. Boom, boom, boom. Almost in an instant, the Imperial Emperors did not hold back at all. They activated their Qi and blood to support the world. In front of Emperor Araki Takeshi, no one dared to be distracted or hold back. The few Imperial Emperors who had just perished were the same. But because of that, the remaining Imperial Emperors' attacks came to a halt. They were unable to form an encirclement immediately. The goal of Wu Dao's real body, releasing the voice of all spirits, was not to kill, but for that fleeting moment. The battle between top experts was fought for that instant. Although there were nearly 300 Imperial Emperors around, at that moment, Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian was facing Wu Dao's real body alone. Furthermore, Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian was the closest to Wu Dao's real body. He suffered the most impact from the voice of all spirits. Before the two of them truly collided, Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian was already bleeding from his 7 orifices from the voice of all spirits. His face was covered in blood. Wu Dao's real body's fist struck his 108,000 feathers. Without any obstruction, the feathers were instantly reduced to dust. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's figure was still flying uncontrollably towards the Dao-dermic vortex. This scene was extremely strange. It was as though he was slamming into Wu Dao's real body's fist. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian realized that if he failed to escape, he would probably be killed on the spot. As long as he could survive the strike, the remaining 2 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors and the other Imperial Emperor's attacks would descend upon him. He would then be able to escape the calamity. Ah! Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian roared into the sky as he pushed his lifeblood to its limits. At the same time, he conjured a dermic seal with his hands. Blazing flames flickered as he condensed a forbidden art. At the same time, Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian conjured his consciousness and released an Essence Spirit Mystic Technique. Bloodline World, Forbidden Art, Essence Spirit Mystic Technique. With his life hanging by a thread, Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian released all his trump cards, just to withstand the punch from Wu Dao's real body. Wu Dao's real body pressed forward with an indomitable will. His punches were ferocious, and he had no intention of dodging. With a thought, He wore the mask of Mara on his face once again. With the mask of Mara, he could neutralize Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's essence spirit mystic technique. At the same time, his glabella shimmered as the hell-suppressing cauldron transformed into a stream of light. It arrived above Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's head and came crashing down from the sky. Boom! Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's dermic world had yet to fully take form when it was smashed by the hell-suppressing cauldron. Dense cracks appeared, and it quickly shattered. Under the tremendous impact, his forbidden Dao art dissipated under the tearing of Wu Dao's dermic vortex. It failed to condense. This was what it meant to counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. While the devil was a foot tall, the Dao was 10 feet tall. All Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian's attacks were neutralized by Wu Dao's real body through other means. As for Wu Dao's real body's fist, it maintained an invincible offensive that destroyed everything. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian had a look of despair. He wanted to conjure a few arch-divine weapons to stop Wu Dao's real body. However, the moment these divine weapons were released, they were sent flying by Wu Dao's real body's fist. This punch carried a torrential might as it rumbled over. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian felt a sense of helplessness, as though he could not withstand it. It was as though any force would crumble at the first blow in front of this punch. At that moment, he sensed a powerful will that burned fiercely and fearlessly. It was majestic and blotted out the sky. Against this will, he was as puny as an ant. Bam! Under everyone's watch, Wu Dao's real body seemed to brush past Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian. However, when the two passed each other, only Wu Dao's real body was left. Behind him, there were still some weak and fragmented flames. Inspector Heavenly Ambassador Yin Tian was crushed by Wu Dao's real body with a single punch. His body and Dao dissipated, and Inspector Heavenly Ambassador perished just as the battle began. This scene dealt a huge psychological blow to the Empyrean lords of the heavenly courts and the celestial tribute world. There were only 9 Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors in the entire heavenly courts. Now, in just a single exchange, Wu Dao's real body killed one of them under the noses of nearly 300 Empyrean lords. How domineering was that? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.